Welcome, everybody. First, we have the invocation from with Pastor Frederick Moore from Restoration Christian Church. If you could come up, Pastor.
And with me as we begin prayer. Oh, most gracious Father, we just come right now to give you thanks, Lord, as we go forth through this meeting, Father. And we will continue to give you all the praise and all the glory. In Jesus' name.
We now have the recognition of special awards. I'll be handing out certificates of appointment and 2 proclamations. You're gonna First, we have a certificate of appointment for Cody Charlin for the Raleigh Sister Cities Board. Cody, hey. There you go. Thank you very much for serving our city. I think you'll have a good time.
Hope so.
Then we have Lynn Menges, who's been appointed the Raleigh Convention and Performing Arts Center Authority. Lynn, thank you so much for your service. You've got some exciting projects you'll be working on with the new Convention Center Hotel and whatnot, so glad to have you join us.
Thank you. Honored to serve.
Thank you so much. And third, we have Richard Moore for the Electrical Examining Board. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Wake Tech Community College, one of my favorite places.
We dedicated a new building today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have a proclamation. Let's see, is Mike Rakowskis here? Hey, Mike, you want to come up?
Got several members of our club that are with me as well.
Okay, come on up. How are you? Good seeing you. Okay, I'm going to read this, and then you can see some folks want to get a photo. Okay, whereas the Friendship Force of Raleigh was chartered in 1985, and whereas members of the Friendship Force Club of Raleigh have hosted guests from and represented our community on tours of numerous countries such as New Zealand, Canada, Belgium, Great Britain, Germany, and the Ukraine. I want to do that. And whereas the Friendship Force serves as ambassadors of goodwill with other countries, 2020 is Friendship Force of Raleigh Day. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
They're down there trying to get a photo. Okay, thank you very much. Now it's my honor and privilege to ask Charlie Ainsworth, Officer Charlie Ainsworth, to come up, and his wife. Whereas Charlie Ainsworth dreamed as a young child of one day becoming a police officer, and whereas he moved to Raleigh to attend North Carolina State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in psychology, and whereas Charlie Ainsworth was a member of the 117th session of the Raleigh Police Department's Training Academy and became an officer in December 2017, living that childhood dream. And whereas on January 9th, 2019, Officer Ainsworth was shot at close range while answering a call about a suspicious vehicle, and he has fought courageously through numerous surgeries and medical procedures. And whereas Officer Ainsworth returned to work 1 year later, a miracle indeed, on January 9th, 2020, with the full support of his officers at the Raleigh Police Department, and his return to work was and continues to be celebrated by residents, visitors, and all those who are affiliated with the city of Raleigh. Indeed, I saw him honored at the Carolina Hurricanes game, both of you. And whereas Officer Ainsworth further demonstrates his dedication to serving the community on both a personal and professional level and stands as an example for all to follow. Now therefore, I, Mary Ann Baldwin, Mayor of the City of Raleigh, do hereby proclaim February 18th, 2020, in the City of Raleigh is Officer Charlie Ainsworth Day. It is my... We have a presentation. Just should have brought a Kleenex with me for that. We now have a presentation from the United States Tennis Association. Kelly Gaines and Robin Jones, I believe, are here, and David Bell is here from the Raleigh Parks. You're right here. Awesome, thank you.
On behalf of United States Tennis Association, North Carolina.
We thank you for continuing to get people to play tennis.
Well, I saw you the other day, and you said you would have a check for me. I wasn't expecting this, $66,500. So thank you to the U.S. Tennis Association. And I think we all want a photo here. So let's,
You want to again?
how's that? Fantastic. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. Appreciate it. We always love the checks. Okay, excellent. I just want to say again, Officer Ainsworth courage and his family's courage. Wow, what an example for all of us. Thank you. First, we have the consent agenda. There have been no items pulled. May I ask for a,
Move to approve.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, there we go. The next, we have the report and recommendation of the Planning Commission.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon. Ken Bowers, Planning and Development. So we'll start. Here's what's currently calendar for the March 3rd public hearing, and there are currently a total of 5 zoning cases and no text changes to zoning conditions, and then a number of sidewalk petitions and other transportation-related items. So this is a report from the last planning commission, and there's just 2 items to report. This is rezoning Z417. Why is this case so old? Well, there were a number of owners that had to be brought together to finalize this, and the applicant took some time to perform that. But this is taking the last remaining bit of a planned development district that was for the Stanhope Avenue area and replacing it with a RX12 zoning district with conditions. Those conditions are largely designed to mimic the provisions of the original master plan, but they do provide some additional flexibility in terms of programming non-residential and residential service space in the building. This site is, of course, built out. It is the site of a large student housing project. So the Planning Commission and the Wade CAC have both recommended approval unanimously and recommended public hearing date is March 3rd.
Any questions? Would someone like to make a motion to schedule the public hearing?
Move to approve the public hearing for March 3rd, 2020.
Second? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, then we also have this next text change.
Okay, so this is a text change to zoning conditions for a site in Park Lake Avenue. This is an office park development that is south of Crouchy Valley Mall along Edwards Mill Road. And this is adjusting some of the conditions as it related to accommodating retail use as part of the site, as part of a new plan to create some retail amenities on site for for this mixed-use project. Northwest CAC recommended approval, Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval, and again, staff recommends a March 3rd public hearing date.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Move for approval for March 3rd hearing date.
Okay, second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, next we have
Thank you very much.
special items. Thank you, Ken. We have special items. Mr. City Manager, you.
Sure. So the first item today under special items is a community engagement update. I wanted to make a couple of comments as the staff gets ready to make the presentation. As the council may recall, the council adopted several motions at your previous meeting related to community engagement. Our purpose today is to really do 2 things. One is to provide you some information and education about the current efforts that we provide within the community engagement division within our Housing and Neighborhoods Department. And the second is to provide an update on our efforts to respond to the direction to identify a consultant. For a point of emphasis, the staff stands ready to respond to whatever direction the council may see fit in this regard. We thought that the presentation today would be a good way of level setting information about what the Division of Community Engagement currently does, and be happy to receive any feedback as a part of that process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Linda Jones. She is our manager over the division within the Department of Housing and Neighborhoods to make the presentation.
City Manager, engagement. So we have a total of 18 staff in our division, and here we're broken down our respective units. It's administration, neighborhood services, youth services, digital inclusion, and volunteer services. And I've also listed out how many full-time employees we have in each respective unit, and we currently have one part-time in our digital inclusion division. So how do we currently engage? We actually use 2 evidence-based strategies, and that is called asset-based community development and the International Association for Public Participation. ABCD, as it's known, is an engagement strategy that means that not only do members of the community participate in their own decisions, but they also draw on their own talents and resources, or assets, if you will, to make the community stronger. And they do this through 5, can you hear me correctly? And they do this through 5 different principles. That's discovering assets, discovering what people care about, mobilizing groups to act, recognizing different roles for people, and leading by stepping back. Our second and most newest engagement strategy that we are using now is the International Association for Public Participation. And this strategy helps clarify the role of the public or the community in planning and decision making, and how much influence the community has over planning and decision-making processes. And we use this particular spectrum that lists the five, that identifies the five important aspects of the spectrum: inform, consult, involve, collaborate, or empower. And with this particular model, you can actually identify which level that you want to engage the public or the community, particularly pertaining to what topic or particularly of the time that you want to engage the community. Again, staff has really been engaged in the IAP2. As of March last year, we were trained in this particular engagement model. We also collaborated with other departments that engage. Those departments were the police department, communications, sustainability, parks and recreation and cultural resources, and also planning. In addition, staff attended the national conference in Charlotte of September of last year and presented on the IAP2 strategy that we had used through engaging the community with DHIC and Washington Terrace. And then we will be actually presenting at the NUSA conference, Neighborhoods USA, later on this year. Our proposal has been accepted to talk about IAP2 as well. So now I will go through the respective units that I mentioned earlier, starting with neighborhood services. So what do we do in neighborhood services? We organize and coordinate capacity building programs targeted to outreach, education, training, citizen involvement, leadership, and problem solving. And we do this through all these programs: the Citizen Leadership Academy, Raleigh Neighborhood College, our Hispanic Latino initiatives, Neighborhood Exchange and Registry, and our Improvement and Arts Funds. So I'll just take a brief moment to give you a summary of what all these programs do. So you will receive an invitation to our annual Raleigh Neighborhood Exchange. This year we're really excited because we're taking the exchange outside of the walls and having a festival in Moore Square. And it's a lot listed on the slide, but I wanted you to get the backdrop of we will be engaging the community between 4 and 10. We will have our city vendors coming out talking about what we do and how we can support the community. Of course, our popcorn, our snow cones. We're going to have a neighborhood talent show, and we're also going to feature a movie that night, so kind of theater in the park, if you will. That idea actually came from when we went to the NUSA conference last year, Riverside, California. We found it to be very successful, so we've been able to put a program in place for that. Our Raleigh Neighborhood College began in 2002, and this is where citizens have an opportunity to participate in city government and find out exactly what each department does. We have this program every fall and spring, and to date we've graduated approximately 900 graduates. Garden clubs or community watch groups. And so as registering your neighborhood, part of the benefit is that you're able to rent out at no cost our snow cone, our popcorn machine, and also have an opportunity to meet 4 times a year through collaboration with Parks and Recreation at their centers. And so this is really where the ABCD model comes into effect, where we're empowering our community by stepping back. To date, we have 351 neighborhoods registered, and they are located geographically throughout the city of Raleigh. Our Hispanic Latino initiatives, we provide ways and resources for Spanish-speaking residents to get involved in their neighborhoods and their communities. And we do this through replicating our Raleigh Neighborhood College and Citizens Leadership Academy, through Viva Raleigh Festival and the Latino Conference. And so here, I just wanted to demonstrate some pictures of how this has been very successful. This is one of our newest programs that we've done, and we're very excited about it. So we don't offer this one as often yet, but we're working toward that. Our Viva Raleigh Festival and our Latino Festival Conference, we actually alternate those every year. The Latino Conference is operated fully in Spanish and translated in English. And so topics involve education, resources, health, education. And so the committee is comprised of Hispanic residents, and they help set the agenda, bring in keynote speakers and things of that nature. Our neighborhood art and improvement funds. Our newest program is the Arts Fund. We began in collaboration with the Raleigh Arts Commission in 2019, and to date we have approved 4 applications. This is just for the creative minds that have different arts or murals that they would like to work on with their community, and of course this brings the community together, as well as our neighborhood improvement funds. To date we have 20 applications approved, and that's more so of beautification, maybe a street sign or a gardening type projects. Other is our landlord training. Our landlord training is offered twice a year in April and October. This gives us an opportunity to work with the legal community and property managers. And so we partner with our code enforcement unit, Raleigh Housing Authority, City Attorney's Office, police, and property managers. Community cleanups. We have had this, and this has been very successful, working with our Solid Waste Services Department, where we actually provide the pickup sticks and the vests and things of that nature, where people actually care about cleaning up their neighborhoods on their own. So I've said a lot, and so we're very proud to be nationally recognized by Neighborhoods USA. Again, this is a grassroots organization that help to empower neighborhoods and communities. In 2015, we actually won grand prize in first place through the Wedge Garden. In 2016, we won the newsletter competition for the historic Oakwood neighborhood. And then we had a gap. In 2018, we were transitioning new staff. That was me. And so we did return back in 2019, and we will return again this year. And again, we are asked to present on IAP 2. Excuse me. So our other 2 divisions that we have units are youth services and digital inclusion services. And thank you so kindly for putting it on your agenda for Friday, February the 7th. We really appreciated y'all coming out to the Pathway Center. So I'm going to just kind of give you the mission of what the Pathway Center is, but we gave you a lot of information there. So I'm happy to answer questions, but I don't want to overload you because y'all spent a great deal of time, and we truly appreciated that coming out on a Friday. So with our Raleigh Pathway Center, we have a mission and a partnership between Wake Tech, Capital Area Workforce Development. And we try to do 3 things. We focus on our workforce development training and certifications, employment and career opportunities, and supportive resources to increase opportunity and provide pathways to success. I have listed our programs and services. Just to highlight a few more is Raleigh Summer Youth Employment Program, Partnership Raleigh, Digital Connectors, our Capital Area Youth Build, and other host of programs that we are offering to the community. So what do we do in volunteer services? We have 2 programs there that provide opportunities to individuals in all age groups to help them recognize and develop their skills and become active and involved in their communities and neighborhoods. So we do this through our foster grandparents program and through our Volunteer Raleigh program. To date, we have 58 foster grandparents serving 145 students. We have 551 participants and residents active in our Volunteer Raleigh program. And then I also wanted to show you the economic impact of what volunteers have done to date, $140,587.22. Here is a picture with our foster grandparents actually helping with our digital connectors. So this actually happened a couple of weeks ago where they came to the Pathway Center. And so we actually let the foster grandparents drive the agenda. They want to learn how to use their smartphone, their iPad. And so we create whatever they want so that they can be successful. Again, they're giving back in Wake County Public School System and other partnering organizations to help our younger people as well. And it's great. Their minds work way better than mine. So with that, I know it's a little quick. I will be happy to take questions. The next steps at this point will be to hear from Larry Jarvis about setting the stage about the consultant coming on board. But I do want to personally say from me and my staff, we are elated to start to work with the consultant and council to come up with a new community engagement strategy for the city of Raleigh. So thank you.
Linda, before you leave this podium, does anybody have any questions? Councilor
Just
Branch.
a couple. Some of the feedback I received has been around our staff and working with different populations. And I just wondering from a training standpoint, is there something yearly they go to? Is it workshops? Because we have a very diverse, city. So I was wondering, as far as what is staff doing to make sure that those that are working with the residents have the skill sets needed?
Correct. They do. The answer to that is yes. Again, we have just really employed the IAP2 strategy. We brought in a facilitator from Colorado to make sure that staff was skilled up in that. They also take classes at the UNC School of Government pertaining to different climate changes. And when I say climate changes, what's happening in the community. We've brought Dr. John Stevens in to our retreat last year to talk about a session on, no pun intended, but it was old timers and newcomers. And so where do we show up as engagement professionals, and how are we really reaching people? We understand that it's not always inside the office. Staff also attends conferences within their respective disciplines that I mentioned. And so as a requirement, when they come back, we have to do like a share and learn through our community staff meetings, so that it's not just them getting the information. We all are skilled up, so because we do have to jump in and help everybody.
Okay. I'm glad to know I'm included in the old comers since I was born and raised here. The last thing is, in the manager's update, can we get the neighborhood registry map so we know where our registered communities are, and see if maybe there are some gaps that as counselors we can help facilitate?
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, Linda, I had one, not question, but remark. For the, that we recently created a commission on Hispanic and immigrant affairs through the Human Relations Department. Could you reach out to members of the community that have gone through the City College program and whatnot, letting them know about this opportunity and seeking applications? I think that would be very helpful.
Yes, ma'am. We would be happy to do that.
Okay.
And we
thank
are
you.
also we are collaborating with Dr. Caesar as well with those the process.
Okay, great.
So thank you for that.
Thank you. And I love the Digital Connectors program. That
Thank
just
you.
makes my heart so warm. Those kids are amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. As directed by council, we are going through an informal solicitation process to identify a community engagement consultant to work with council as you look at a model that you would like to have in place. We are meeting with one potential consultant tomorrow to kind of look at a proposed scope of services that we would bring back to you. But in the meantime, if there is a particular individual that you would like us to consider in that informal solicitation, if you would let us know, hopefully by the end of the week, we would be glad to reach out to them. I really don't have anything more to add, but happy to answer any questions.
Some of the feedback I received from the community at a Saturday meeting is they would like to see somebody local who understands the community. So
Okay.
just for what that's worth.
Okay.
Okay?
And can we also whoever's hired, be sure that they have a plan on engagement from some of those that have been around and some that are new, so it's diverse. And lastly, I think starting with the work from 2017 or any prior work, so that they're not starting from scratch or ground zero, because we're trying to, I think this council has to move a very, quick manner strategically to get things going. So I think there's been a lot of work that's already been done that they don't have to start from zero.
Absolutely.
And I think to that point, the goal of the consultant when, I proposed it in the motion was less kind of telling us what to do, but more being a facilitator and helping facilitate the council and the folks that have been leading in various roles, whether it be CACs or neighborhood associations, or have gone through the various programs that that our engagement folks have already put together, and the 2017 strategies that were identified and just not adopted. So I think that's kind of the the beauty of this role is there's so much out there and it's kind of been disjointed to date. And so I think it's bringing all that together and saying, here's the strategy, and let's layer that with national best practices, and here's the plan. So I echo what Corey said, that I think, that's kind of the plan. So thank you for expediting that process, and I think we're excited to hear what comes.
But also, I would say, let the consultant be a consultant. I mean, we're depending on him or her to really bring us best practices from other areas, but also define best practices for Raleigh.
Got it. All right, thank you.
Thank you. We good? Okay. Next, we have the John Chavis Memorial Park Historic Interpretive Exhibit Process.
Good afternoon, members of council. My name is Luke Wallenbeck, and I'm here to present the department's recommendations for how to, hold on. Oh, it's already up. That's great. I didn't notice. How to proceed with the historic interpretation at John Chavis Memorial Park. I'll start with a little background and end with our recommendations. This is a discussion item, and we'd appreciate any feedback and direction. Okay. A revised master plan was approved by City Council on May 20th of 2014, and it was organized around 3 activity plazas, which you can see here highlighted in pink. To the north is the Heritage Plaza, in the center, the Central Plaza, and to the south, the Carousel Plaza. The revised master plan included recommendations for honoring the past. You can see here a zoom in of those recommendations. It starts with honoring the past, and there's quite a few other recommendations as well, from aquatic and community center down to more park maintenance and operations. More specifically, the recommendations include the following: retain all early park features remaining in the original location, honor important former features, memorialize significant events and people through public art and signage, and D, incorporate findings from the historic designation process. Related to item D, in April of 2016, John Chavis Memorial Park was added to the National Park Service National Register of Historic Places. In further detail with item C, the plan continues. Develop a cohesive interpretive plan, incorporate interpretation recommendations from proposed South Park Heritage Walk, honor John Chavis through public art, consider exhibits that are high-tech and high-touch. Zooming in a little bit, you can see the historic core. And it's really a cluster of historic structures that still stand here today around the original park entrances of Worth Street and Chavis Way. Most of these structures were built in the late 1930s and early 1940s, and many of them were built by the Works Progress Administration, constructed, which includes some of the items you can see on the plan here: the old Carousel House, Picnic Shelter 1 and 2, stone steps, and a number of other features that are in that general area of the park. Oh, I should also mention that this cluster is sort of organized around the idea of a heritage plaza, which is why it's shown in this location. So looking forward, our department recommends the following: to contract a qualified consultant team for a phase 1, use the request for qualifications process, target teams with similar project experience, and to develop a project scope with the goal of a cohesive interpretive plan for the campus, and implementing an exhibit outside of the old Carousel House. Furthermore, we recommend a public engagement process that is based in the feedback and consultation approach in our park planning policy. And that is, if you'd allow me to read just for a second, directly from that policy. It's a process that involves citizens and decision-making in a more intentional and sustained way. The public is consultant throughout the planning, design, and development process in public forums, and will see their advice, concerns, and aspirations directly reflected in final decision-making. And part of that feedback and consultation approach includes an advisory board. So one of our recommendations is to utilize the park leadership or the public leadership group that existed during the master plan to continue through this phase, and to provide numerous public forums for feedback. As far as funding, we have requested in FY21 CIP $150,000 for historic interpretation phase 1. We have $200,000 for historic shelter number 1 renovation, if you remember from the map. That should be beginning soon. And we have $150,000 for the resurfacing of the existing walking track at the park. We recommend the Heritage Plaza to be funded in phase 2. For the timeline, we could start the RFQ process immediately and begin planning and design this summer through the winter, with the goal of having fabrication and installation of the element outside the carousel house in time for the ribbon cutting for the entire construction project that's happening right now, which would be summer of 2021.
Oh, that would be awesome.
So with that, I'll take any questions. Welcome any feedback.
I know Councilor Branch would like to comment.
First of all, thank you for the information. And just for clarification for myself and others, the historic interpretation phase 1 is like the temporary piece to get in to coincide with phase 1 of the overall project. But the final Heritage Plaza build out would be completed entirely in phase 2. So we're doing phase 1, getting something within, we're doing the interpretive piece into phase 1, and then we'll work on the complete overall build out in phase 2 of the project. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. So we want to have a plan for the whole campus, all the historic interpretive opportunities around the campus. The Heritage Plaza is an important part of that. So we see this plan, it's really 2 parts. One, the plan helping to support the development of the Heritage Plaza in a future phase. But then we want to make sure that we have something on the ground for the opening of the upcoming or the current project. Whether that's temporary or permanent, it could be permanent. I don't know. It kind of depends on how the process bears out.
Okay. And also, I know we're working on a parks bond that will address phase 2 as well as connecting Chavis and Top Green together going forward. So I just want to mention that because I believe there's a meeting starting Thursday that our parks board is having. And the reason I'm bringing it up because I know Chavis is still part of that parks bond as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I understand. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I'm giving someone else a chance before I make a motion if anyone else has anything.
I wanted to just, is anybody else have a question? Okay. I just wanted to ask all of those who are here today in support of Chavis Park to please stand up and show off your lovely blue shirts. Thank you.
I see. We see you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here today. All right, Councilor Branch.
I move that we proceed with the recommendation from Parks, Rec, and Cultural Resources with the recommendations for John Chavis Memorial Park for the funding A and B, including all recommendations in the timeline.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Thank you. Good work. And it's very exciting that this could open with phase 1.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have some happy people. That's nice to see. Thank you. And Lynette, thank you for all your leadership and everything you've put into this. I know your heart and soul has been in this. Thank you. Okay, next we have options for remote city council meetings.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Kiara Jones, Assistant Communications Director, no relation to Linda Jones. And I am here to talk a little bit about some things you need to consider when holding council meetings off-site. So first, we're going to talk about communication. Obviously, we're going to push out that information on our website and social media and share it with the media, but we also wanted to ensure that we communicate that information as far in advance as possible and as often as possible, because we don't want people to show up here at the council chamber and we're actually off-site. So that's something to consider. Communication, communication, communication. And the second part for that is to consider how we're actually going to broadcast the meetings. So we have been able to identify a way that will allow us to continue to broadcast live on all the mediums that we currently do. So that's RTN 11 on YouTube and online. But that particular option requires a strong and stable internet connection, which may or may not be available at different locations. And so the possibility of that broadcast actually being interrupted or not happening at all is there. But the option that would actually secure that is bonded cellular. And we're able to pull that in, and it's going to be great. We don't need any sort of internet connection. We'll be able to broadcast to all of our mediums, but that will come at a cost. And we are wanting to ensure that everyone is able to hear all of you clearly, if you're there actually live or if you're watching via television. So that's going to also require an investment in some audio issues, things like mics and speakers and all those types of things. So that's going to come at a cost as well. And the last thing to consider is that we are in this very controlled space. And so we have mounted cameras, we have multiple angles, we have audio that's controlled, and we have the ability to use our annotators so we can write on the screens, and we have this timer. So some of those things are not going to be available off-site. So we have to keep that in mind. If we're someplace like a gym, I'm sure you've been there in a gym before and you're able to tell how sometimes the audio is not as good. So we have to keep that in mind. And some of the things that we're used to here in the chamber won't be available in those locations. So that's very high level. I wanted to share that with you and to answer any questions you may have for us.
I have one question.
Okay, Councilor Cox.
I just wanted to also ask about security considerations. Obviously, we have security here in this building, along with people at the doors, and I was wondering how that will be taken into consideration.
I will, Ruffin?
Sure, I'll help you with that.
I'll throw that to you.
Right. So I think if we have sufficient notice, we would handle that with the same level of security expectations that we would have in this facility. And particularly if we were to choose them in one of our parks facilities, we already have security protocols and plans in place. So we would manage that. All I would just simply say is we probably need some lead time to kind of organize ourselves.
Anybody else? Well, for me, when I brought up part of this, I was thinking more along the lines of work sessions and having them be much more informal. So, in other words, remember, take your dog,
Yes.
bring your dog to council day. Councilor Stewart wanted bring your kids to council day,
See you.
I think Lee Taus wanted bring your cat to council day. Thanks, Lee here. I didn't forget her this time. I didn't forget the cats. But we wanted to do something more informal. So if we wanted to do something like this, like say, for instance, we were having a public hearing and it was in an area of Barwell Road that was of interest to that community, well, then we might look to move that there. But what I was thinking more in lines was work sessions, we could Facebook Live it, and it was more supposed to be fun and to go where people are. So maybe perhaps if you can ruminate on that a little bit and come back to us with some ideas.
Okay. So generally speaking, we have that capability. If you want to go off-site anywhere, we could go Facebook Live, we could go YouTube Live, and we could have it on our channel. So we do have that ability.
Okay.
And if I could, Mayor, I'm sorry.
Councilor Stewart.
I was just going to say, to kind of piggyback off of that, I know Growth and Natural Resources Committee is also considering a field trip out to have one of our future meetings side of this space to make sure that we are meeting folks where they are on a specific topic. So I think smaller settings might be what we're going for here.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
So if I could just add maybe a general observation. Obviously, we will always try to accommodate anything the council may wish. I do think your regular business meetings
Always?
associated. Always try to accommodate. Try
is the key word.
Give you, yes, I did say that. In terms of cost and things to have to handle, I do, just as an observation, think that your regular meetings with your official public hearings and your public comment, that just adds a lot more to it. So I do think, like Councilmember Stewart, with a specific committee, or we have a work session and we only pick one or two topics, and it narrows the population. It could be geographically interested, but it helps us manage that. So we could look at a couple of upcoming work sessions and pick some topics that might be of potential interest. And what I'm also hearing is you're not talking about trying to spend a tremendous amount of money investing in equipment to be able to do a lot of that. So I'm hearing a little bit lower impact in terms of how to manage that, and we can stream it or record it and then play it again and not have to stand up as much equipment. There's quite a bit of a cost in your memo if we wanted to do that on a regular basis. So maybe let us take another shot at it and bring you back another proposal.
And I'm just going to throw something crazy out there, too. Perhaps we could look at some type of partnership with a TV station who might be interested in broadcasting some of these things, and we could actually get more coverage out of something like that.
Yes,
Just
we
throw that out
actually
there.
discussed that, and obviously they would have to agree to cover it, but that is a possibility.
And one of the things that came to mind too is one of the universities that has a strong AV program. NC State comes to mind. But I want to say as well that as part of the engagement plan, that these smaller outings I think will be interesting. So this is just a fun thing. It's a fun thing for us to pilot test over the next coming months. And so I both agree with Ruffin on the kind of let's not put a ton of resources into this at the moment until we test it and see what works and what doesn't, and until we get the strategy back from the consultant. But I think that this all leads into the longer term vision of how we're meeting people on specific topics. So thank you for doing this, and I'm excited to see what you come back with.
Yeah.
I just want to bring my dog to council, okay?
No one's stopping you, Marianne.
And I definitely want to agree that a smaller scale, other than a full-fledged city council meeting. And also, since we're plugging university, St. Augustine's University also has a TV and radio station.
That's right.
That can also air meetings to reach our communities.
Councilor Melton, did you have anything?
I was just going to suggest, I don't know how far out we have work sessions planned, but if we want to put this idea to action, maybe we could look at some upcoming lists and see if there's one that makes sense to move into a community environment and then do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's part of the process.
We'll bring you back. We'll bring you back a proposal.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for always trying.
Try hard.
Try hard. Okay, next, item 4 is a request to relocate an abandoned cemetery at 4800 Durley Road.
Right. Mayor and Council, as you recall, this is the procedural item we suggested to you as these come forward to the city for requests to potentially move cemeteries. We went ahead and suggested that we put this as last on your special items. And so with that, the applicant can come forward and make their presentation. And just for your information, this is something that you can choose to do. This is up to your discretion. Obviously, the applicant is making a proposal, but it's certainly up to you as to whether or not you would like to consider it.
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the council and Madam Mayor. I'm Jamie Schwadler with Parker Poe at 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of Hanson Aggregates and this request. We submitted the affidavit of Mr. Alan Burnett with Hanson that's in your packet that details the process that's before us today, but I'd like to just briefly describe what that process entails. We're seeking relocation of 15 unmarked graves at a property on 4800 Durley Road. Now, that property has been in possession of Hanson for some time, and North Carolina law sets out a specific requirement for when a landowner is seeking to relocate existing graves that are in an abandoned cemetery on the site. And there's specific requirements for both before and after that relocation. So in this context, two things must happen before the relocation. We must seek the consent of the controlling jurisdiction in Wake County within the municipal boundaries of the city of Raleigh. That is before you today. So we're seeking your consent today to relocate these graves. And then you also must notify the next of kin within 30 days before you actually remove or relocate the graves, if those kin are able to be found and noticed. And so what we did is we hired Ms. Deborah Joy, who's a registered professional archaeologist, and she went out and conducted a site visit and extensive research as to whether these next of kin could be located. And what she found is that when she went out on her site visit, there's 15 unmarked graves, marked only with a field stone, no inscription or markings of who is interred there. And then she went to both the state archives and lists of abandoned cemeteries. And what she found is that the cemetery is not listed in the state archives. When she did a deed and title search, she went back to 1808, and in none of the deeds and in none of those plats could she find a reference to the cemetery. And so based on her professional opinion, which is attached in the report as an exhibit to Mr. Burnett's affidavit, it was her conclusion that there were no next of kin that could be readily identified within the scope of her professional work. But nevertheless, she followed the statute, and she provided an affidavit that's attached as well to Mr. Burnett's affidavit that shows how she complied with that second prong, which is that she provided 30 days notice well in advance of any relocation of the graves by running an ad in the News and Observer for 4 consecutive weeks and describing the request and asking that persons who are interested or might be next of kin come forward. Nobody responded to that ad, and nobody contacted Ms. Joy or Hanson separately from the process to step forward as next of kin. And so we submitted that affidavit and those materials before you today to show that we've complied with the prior actions that are required before the relocation. And Mr. Burnett is here today to answer any questions. He's also provided in his affidavit that he understands what the requirements of the statute are going forward, and that after and during the process of the grave relocation, Hanson intends to comply with those requirements. They've engaged a professional for that practice as well, and that will be overseen by somebody who regularly practices in the grave relocation business. Finally, I should mention there is a separate rezoning request that's associated with the property. This is a separate process that's winding through the city's normal processes for rezoning, completely unrelated to what we're asking you here today. What we're asking you today is consent to remove and relocate the graves, and Hanson's seeking that consent regardless of what the outcome of the grave relocation is. But in full disclosure, I wanted to make sure there was no confusion there. So I'm happy to elaborate on any of this or answer any questions from the council. Mr. Burnett is here as well, but we will request your consent to follow this today because we have followed the procedures required under North Carolina law. Yes, Mr. Cox.
If you do not get the rezoning request that you seek, what do you plan to do with the land that would necessitate moving the graves?
The ultimate plan for the land is disposition, sale.
Any additional questions? Councilor Branch.
Where would the graves be moved to?
The professional has identified a replacement in the Oakwood Cemetery, I think the Oak Lawn Cemetery here inside the city of Raleigh.
Okay.
And just to follow up, the statute requires that we register that in the Wake County Register of Deeds. So if someone were to come forward, years from now, they would be able to find in the chain of title for the property this notice that's required under the statute.
Any other questions? Councilor Knight?
It's all very intriguing. I've never had to deal with something like this. On page 11 of 16, I'm sorry, page 7, it has the list of the grantees and grantors, the chain of title. Is that the owner, the grant grantee is the owner of that plot?
The grantor would have been the owner granting it to the grantee, the next person to become the owner of the property, and then it would go in line as the property changed hands.
But, okay, but that doesn't tell us who is buried there, correct?
Correct.
We don't know that.
They're unmarked.
In each one, we don't know.
Correct. And so
Okay.
what Ms. Joy did was she went back through each of those descriptions in the deeds to see whether in the legal description there was a reference to a boundary, 15 feet from the cemetery, et cetera, and there wasn't any reference there.
Sorry, okay. All right, thank you.
I have one question, just, so these were discovered when?
They were discovered within, I believe, the last year as the property was examined for disposition and a survey was completed.
Okay, so it was part of that survey, and that was, okay, I got it. Any other questions? Okay. Do you have a motion to approve the request?
I'll move to support the request.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to vote no, and the reason I'm going to vote no is that I'm concerned that we're moving graves without any specific plans for this property other than for resale. And I don't personally, philosophically view that as a sufficient reason for disturbing these sites. So I will vote no.
Okay, so,
6-2.
that, okay, 6-2. You caught that, Gail? Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the report and recommendation of the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. 3 items today under this report. The first is a presentation and a request for your authorization to move forward on the Dorothea Dix Park Gateway Plaza and Play consultant selection. As you may recall, this particular park project is one element of Phase 1 of Dix Park, and we are working to begin the design process of this element. It's a little bit unusual in that we usually don't move forward with a design element until we have all of the rest of the plan laid out, but we have received some willing partner to help us fund this particular design, and so we're always looking for public-private partnerships. So with that, I'll turn it over to the staff to make the presentation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me. I'm Grace Amon, a planner on the Dix Park planning team. Thank you for having me. This is exciting to be here to talk about moving forward with the master plan. This month is 1 year since the adoption of the master plan. So with that, we will talk about moving forward. Phase 1 of the master plan has many projects. One of them is the Gateway Plaza and Play. The Gateway is the first major design and implementation project of the park. As the city manager mentioned, it is funded for the design with a grant from the Dix Park Conservancy. The area of the Gateway is along Lake Wheeler Road. This area is chosen because it is the only area along Lake Wheeler Road that is at grade with the road and the neighbors, so it makes a good transition from the park to the neighbors across the street. It will be a new entrance into the park. It will have plaza, play, areas for gathering, public art. It also will include extension of Dow Adams and Grissom Streets into the park and temporary parking to support it. This builds from the 3 master plan principles, which is to open up and connect. As I mentioned, opening to the neighbors, the extension of the streets into the site, build from what is there. This is currently an open area that was the recreation field for the patients of the mental health hospital, and to offer something for everyone. This Plaza and Play project will draw in people of all ages from across the city and the state. So the purpose of the RFQ for this area was to find a multidisciplinary design team with significant experience in creating these high-quality urban spaces, in particular teams that have had success with urban plaza and destination play. For this process, we had an interdepartmental city staff evaluation team that includes staff from the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources, City Planning, Department of Transportation, and Engineering Services. We received 9 submittals. We evaluated them on the following: corporate background and experience, project understanding, approach schedule, including public participation, team organization and structure, and personnel qualifications. This selection process had 2 parts. We began with going through the advertising pre-submittal meeting. We evaluated them with scores. The staff team then met and narrowed it down to 4 teams for interviews. Had those interviews, and I'm here to present those rankings to you. The ranking is with Michael Van Valkenburg Associates is the #1 team. Nelson Berg Woltz is #2. OJB Landscape Architects is 3, and Surface 6, 7, 8. Michael Van Valkenburg Associates is the recommended team because they have a proven track record with design and implementation of these high-profile urban spaces, including the Plaza and Play. They understand the complexity of the site, including the coordination with plan and existing neighborhood and parallel projects. There are several projects going on in the area with the NCDOT Access Study, which is part of our Phase 1, looking at the roads around the park. Also the Dix Park Edge Study that is coming up, as well as the projects that are happening in the park. It's also a complex park with, there are many unknowns with the site. There's aged infrastructure and limited documentation of the site over time. They had a great understanding of the timeline and demonstrated effective and efficient public outreach. They have a engagement sub-consultant on their team that has a working relationship with them on other projects, and the references illustrated that they have a very good, efficient, and effective techniques for outreach. And then the individual qualifications and the team organization, as I mentioned, this is a complex project. They have a team of sub-consultants put together that will help staff navigate the anticipated challenges and site complexities. Staff recommends authorize for city staff to negotiate the contract in the order of the ranking for the Gateway Plaza and Play. So next steps, we will come back to you with a contract for approval. Our team has been working with engineering services on the evaluation of project delivery options. We will come back to you for approval of the contract, and we hope to kick off the project with engagement to confirm the master plan, priorities and principles, fine-tune the design in the spring of or summer of 2020. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Can I have a motion to approve then?
I move to approve authorizing negotiations with the highest ranked firm, and should negotiations be unsuccessful, authorize staff to negotiate with the next ranked firm in succession until successful contract terms have been achieved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? There you go.
Thank you.
I want to thank the Conservancy for their partnership and fundraising and generosity. This, we can't do this alone. They can't do it alone. Working together, we can finally really make this come alive. This is really exciting. I was on the council, I think it was 5 years ago, when we purchased the property. So to see it come to this point, it is just thrilling. So, yay team.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The second of 3 items is a presentation related to our annual funding process for the Wake Transit Tax District. And as Mr. Eatman is coming forward, just a couple of comments. Usually, you're going to have these budget presentations coming up in your work sessions that begin next week. So you might be asking, why are we doing this today? Well, it's because we have deadlines that are associated with that separate process related to the use of the Wake County transit tax. And we participate in a multi-agency representation process, which Mr. Eatman will go over. And so we have to sort of get that going first. And so the purpose of today is to relay the proposed funding recommendations moving into next fiscal year. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go to the presentation is we're now really starting to see some of the investments in the transit take shape. So in the very beginning, you have to start collecting the tax, you have to get things moving. The route expansions and the purchase of additional buses and the movement of bus rapid transit is really starting to take shape into this next fiscal year. So it's pretty exciting to watch that come to fruition. So with that, I'll ask Mr. Eatman to make the presentation and ask for your support.
And thank you. Again, David Eatman, Transportation. As the manager stated, we're not asking for any action today. This is for information, but the FY21 work plan is open for public comment through the end of this month. To think back, back in 2016, we did have a referendum which allowed us to move forward with the Wake Transit Plan. And that particular referendum did have 4 big moves. Connect the region, connect all communities, provide frequent, reliable urban mobility, and certainly enhance access to transit. As was alluded to, we have many stakeholders as we go through this process. The Transit Planning Advisory Committee is made up of all of the municipalities in Wake County, as well as you can see, other jurisdictions within Wake County as well, and also our TP Foundation. As we think about the actual implementation, certainly the City of Raleigh as project sponsors, we are going to have to approve contracts and services that we implement. But those particular services actually flow to that Transit Planning Advisory Committee as well for adoption. And from there, we have 2 true governing bodies which the City of Raleigh has participation on. That's the Capital Area MPO, as well as the Go Triangle Board of Trustees. So getting into the actual 21 work plan. Today I'm going to talk about Raleigh's elements of implementation of the work plan. It is a larger work plan. There are project sponsors throughout Wake County, such as Cary and Wake County itself for certain projects. But today we'll concentrate on Raleigh's elements. From an operations standpoint, and when I say operations, that's truly the bus service that you see on the street on a daily basis. We'll be enhancing our 5th corridor in FY21. That's Glenwood Avenue, which is Route 6 today, serves downtown out to Raleigh Road. That particular route will go to a 15-minute headway serving Crabtree Valley Mall with connections to other routes at Crabtree Valley Mall. So certainly we're excited about that addition or lowering of that headway. Beyond that, we will be extending service from Raleigh out to Briar Creek. And Briar Creek does receive some minimal service today, but certainly that will be all-day service in that area. Actually, that will extend our ADA coverage area out to Briar Creek as well. And that has been a request for, quite honestly, for quite a while. So I know that many citizens will be, or residents of the area, will be very excited about that opportunity. We also will be adding frequency to an urban loop route. This is on the southern portion, serving between downtown and the 440 Beltline. So Route 21 Raleigh is, from a productivity standpoint, it only runs once an hour currently, but it currently has nearly 40 passengers per hour on a productivity basis across all hours. So this particular route has a lot of service being provided with the level of service that is currently there. We worked with the Wake Transit Plan to add additional service to this route. It was very much in need. As we think about capital projects, that is where a large portion of our effort will be going as we prepare for the services in 21, as well as BRT and other services, bus services as we move forward. We are receiving funding for land acquisition of the paratransit operations and maintenance facility. This facility is planned to be programmed with Wake County. It would be a shared facility with their paratransit services. This is, again, the land acquisition. We also received funds in FY20, and we'll receive additional funds in 22 for the construction of that facility. We're also receiving funds for the East Raleigh transfer facility. This particular facility will serve as the terminus for the New Bern Avenue BRT, as well as it will serve a number of crosstown routes on the east side of Raleigh. And we're also looking at a new Midtown Raleigh facility. We have a number of new bus routes that will be serving the Midtown area. We'll also be lowering frequencies on those routes, so we'll have high frequency service coming from multiple directions into Midtown. And I'm thinking that that comes online around 2023. So we're also upgrading or continue to upgrade our fleet. 15 replacement buses, and they will be compressed natural gas. That will bring our total bus fleet over 50% CNG. That does not include the 5 all-electric vehicles that we'll be receiving this calendar year as well. We're also replacing our paratransit vehicles. They are smaller vehicles, 22-foot vehicles, and considered medium duty. And they do provide our paratransit service. And then we're replacing a number of service and support vehicles. So from a construction standpoint, on-street facilities is still a big element for us. If you see the second bullet, 6 enhanced bus stops. So this will be in a new endeavor for transit. Enhanced bus stops will be at locations where we have higher ridership than a standard bus stop. 2 or more routes actually cross at an intersection. So where we need that higher level of amenity and passenger convenience. So generally what you would see at an enhanced bus stop would be certainly a larger covered area, a larger pad for waiting, trash receptacles. We would also have pedestrian level lighting as well as real-time passenger information at those locations. So it would be like a mini transit hub, but they would be located throughout the city. We have not yet placed all of those. We have criteria within the Wake Transit Plan that tells us where we should be looking to place those. We're refining that with our board currently, and we'll be coming back at a later date and certainly can share the location of all of those enhanced stops. Four BRT corridors are certainly a major component of our programming and capital programming as we go into 21. New Bern Avenue to the east is our first corridor, and we're approximately 30% design on that corridor, and we're moving into LPAs or locally preferred alternatives for the other 3. Southern corridor and western corridor should run pretty parallel as we reach late spring and this summer. With that in mind, we need to make sure that we have the local match available for federal funds when we're ready to receive those. That's not all our decision, obviously. That is a competitive process. So certainly we'll be looking for opportunities to receive that funding as we advance further into NEPA completion or environmental completion, as well as we get further into design. The first bullet you see there is the allocation of funds that would match federal funds when available. We have an additional allocation of funds that will help us take our planning efforts for the remaining corridors into project development. And just a reminder, once we reach that project development stage, basically that says that that project is eligible for future reimbursement. So as we work on the projects, we want to enter those into project development and have them received by the Federal Transit Administration as soon as we can, because we can start collecting those costs or actually tallying those costs and get reimbursed at a later date. I'm not going to review all of these bullets, but certainly the important elements here are that at the end of this month, our public comment period for the work plan comes to a close. We'll be taking the information received from public comment and revising that in March and April. And then a final budget will be made, or recommended budget will be made to TPAC, as well as the Capital Area MPO and the Go Triangle Board of Trustees, hopefully before June 30. So very much a municipal, very close to a municipal process as far as the later stages. We as at the TPAC level have to get out of the gate very early because there are many stakeholders and many touch points that we have to make along the way. This just provides information on how you can make comments on the plan. It also provides a path to see the entire plan. So again, these were the City of Raleigh elements, and I did not go into all of the other elements that are throughout Wake County. And then my apologies, kind of random slide. But we did have some questions earlier this month at a work session about, well, how has transit responded to the increased activities certainly associated with the Wake Transit Plan and BRT. So as you can see here, this is our staff growth in the last 24 months. We have 2 of those positions which are will be filled the last half of this fiscal year. And then, as you can see, we've brought on some BRT staff to help us navigate the federal process. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
No question, just when considering the route to from Crabtree to Briar Creek, I know we have a plan now when traffic is slow, buses have a shoulder. There's no shoulder on 70 to use, so just consider that in setting expectations with the community.
Understood.
A brief comment, if I may. I just wanted to note the inclusion of the Midtown Raleigh transfer station and the addition of routes around Midtown. A lot of the activity around bus rapid transit is focused in other parts of the city. I support that. I love it. It's very important for our city and our region. But up in North Raleigh, we've got unique challenges with public transit, and I think this is going to move us well down the field. Midtown's booming. It's growing really fast, and this is going to be a critical part of managing that growth in a responsible way. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, David, I think you probably remember that we've had many conversations about the transfer stations, and I'm so excited to see those moving forward. You know, that hub and spokes thing that we've worked under for years really isn't great for a growing city. So having those new connection points will really improve our transit plan. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and thank you. And then a second comment I had heard some concerns about the stops on Barwell Road, and I can get you some more specifics. But in this new plan, are you looking at any of those, that area?
So Barwell Road, those stops are funded, and they were funded in a prior year for upgrade. They are either in design or about to be let for construction, and we can provide a quick update on that at a later date. But,
Yeah.
So improvements are coming. Unfortunately, because of the suburban nature of some of those areas, we may have to make some temporary improvements, which will improve things tremendously, but it won't be what our final urban or new environment will be. In other words, we may have to make spot improvements awaiting the future sidewalk projects and roadway projects that will occur.
Okay, maybe you could just include that in a manager's update.
We certainly will.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. In similar fashion, excited to see increased funding for higher frequency for the Glenwood routes 6 and 70X. My folks in my district will be very excited about that, as well as the rest of the city going to downtown. Thank you.
Well, also, I think it helps the city, people get to work.
Yep. Okay, we don't have to vote on anything today, but we'll
Not
look
today.
forward to voting when you bring this back to us. I think we're all anxious to get going, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Last item is on the UDO manual update process. Well, and I know that does not sound like a terribly exciting topic, but I would say that Zach Manor has the ability to make it very exciting, correct? Yes. I will try. Thank you. I just want to say something before we go into this. This is actually an illustration, again, of the value of our strategic planning process. Our growth and natural resources focus area took a look at, from previous council's direction, to look at how we could make some improvements related to our permitting and review process. These manuals are what and I'm going to use very just general interpretive language from how I understand it. These are the manuals that the staff uses to administer the code as it's going through the review process. And so this is not the UDO, but this is the manuals that they use in terms of application. And there's lots of rewrites that need to occur. And so one of the things that happened through GNR is they realized that there were different manuals in different departments. And so they've coordinated this work together to bring this through and as smoothly and efficiently as possible. So the work is a bit tedious from the standpoint of, and we're not going through a lot of detail here, but just the process. But it is really critical and really important to making some of the improvement we've talked about in terms of the administration of the code. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach Manor to lead the way.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. Again, I'll try to keep it exciting. No promises there. So to tell you a little bit about what we're doing today, to follow up on Ruffin's explanation, is we're going to look at 5 manuals specifically that are currently in the process of either review or update as part of this process. There are 9 specifically that are listed in the UDO under section 1.1.12. They each kind of have different advisory groups, different paths, ultimately all culminating here at the council table. Like I said, we'll be talking about 5 of them today. So what are adopted manuals? They're design manuals maintained by the city. They include policies and regulations related to city code and specific ordinances. They're used to provide technical guidance for development and construction. They include detailed specifications and instructions. And the 5 we're talking about today are the City Tree Manual, the Stormwater Manual, the Public Utilities Manual, the Solid Waste Manual, and the Street Design Manual. So many manuals. So why do we use these adopted manuals? Well, so it's information for our stakeholders and partners on policy and regulations. They provide some of the specifics for the UDO requirements. The specific technical detail, it helps project development, gives our community and partners some guidelines to follow. And the manuals are code requirements and are not recommendations. So reasons why we update. We're in a pretty dynamic, fast-moving environment here in the city. Changes to the UDO, changes in business process, changes reflect policy initiatives, departmental staff changes, changes in state regulations, outside requirements, and it provides a regular touch point for staff and the community. So the consolidated approach was align these kind of separate documents to send the same message. I'm here, talking specifically about 5 manuals. I have some expertise with the City Tree Manual, but also some staff is available from those other manuals, as they likely don't want me to delve too deeply into what their changes are being made. So our hope is to reduce internal conflicts, improve the user experience, the clarity and usability of these documents, and be consistent across the board. So, as I mentioned earlier, each of these adopted manuals sometimes has a different path. So the UDO contains the update procedures for the adopted manuals. Ultimately, they all go through the Planning Commission Text Change Committee. The Raleigh City Tree Manual requires City Council approval. The Stormwater Management Design Manual is incorporated into 9.2.1b of the Unified Development Ordinance. So this is the 5 we're talking about, and this is also sort of the expected order in which you would see them. So the tree manual and a little bit about the scope. So the tree manual is a streamlining update. The stormwater management design manual is a major rewrite. Major rewrite for the solid waste services design manual as well. Public utilities handbook is working on a general update, and the street design manual is a major rewrite. So city tree manual overview, we're kind of streamlining. Just to give you some background, this governs the planting and maintenance of city trees, so trees on city owned or controlled property. So that's right-of-way, parks, the municipal building. It includes standards for planting, pruning, removal, and protection of city trees. And it also kind of outlines the procedures for implementing our tree impact permit program, which we use through development and for citizens as well. This is a kind of give you a timeline of where we are currently. As the path with the city tree manual, it was referred to the Parks, Recreation, and Greenway Advisory Board. We went through the Greenway and Urban Trees Committee. We were approved in October 2018. So in between October of 2018 and now was when we kind of met up with the other departments and, kind of wanted to look at all these manuals together before we move forward. It currently would be the first you would see. If all goes well, the expectation in the next couple months. So the Stormwater Management Design Manual. This, again, as I stated, is a major rewrite. This is being done to address stormwater issues due to infill, new stormwater devices, technical updates, and consolidate 2 existing manuals into one. So they currently, winter 2020, their first draft is complete with a consultant. They've made an update to the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission and began their public forums. The open and 30-day public comment period is expected for winter 2020. So their expectation is a spring 2020 bring to council for next steps. The Solid Waste Services Design Manual, also a major rewrite. So this is to address design and access requirements, also aim to reduce the number of containers on the streets and address conflicting requirements with the Unified Development Ordinance. They currently in January 2020, under review by a consultant and are working on the second draft. They look to begin their public and internal comment period in March of this year. The Public Utilities Handbook is a general update that will reflect changes to state law and city code, technical specification update, and then update any outdated policies and procedures, for example, capacity assurance. So they currently are in process for the first draft underway. They have an expectation of a spring 2020 planned public comment period. Street Design Manual, the last of our manuals that we're talking about. So this is also a major rewrite. New practices and requirements would be updated. They'd provide construction standards, also improve guidance for lane and sidewalk closures, as well as street and sidewalk repairs. They are currently evaluating the scope of work after reviewing initial feedback. This includes collaboration with the Transportation Department and seeking guidance on obtaining a consultant to move forward. So the next steps, there is no recommended action by council today. Once these design manual edits are complete, typically council would authorize the review by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission would conduct its review and then make the recommendation back to council. Council could then adopt or discuss, if not ready to adopt, at any period during that process. And so that's the end of my slides. If anybody has any questions or some ideas to keep the excitement up, I'm open.
I was expecting like singing or dancing or something.
So I can do a tree interpretive dance, but that's probably about my limit. So.
No, okay, cool.
All right.
Yeah. So there is no action for us to take. I think that what you've outlined in terms of bringing the changes forward to the Planning Commission and then having them review and then having that come to us makes perfect sense. So next time, though, Zach, I want to see the interpretive tree. Yeah.
The
Got
light
it.
version. All right.
Okay, any questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks.
I just have one question. This is like a UDO amendment, so is there already been authority, or do you need to vote on that to go to Planning Commission?
Oh, we need to vote? So I will make a motion to follow the items as outlined, that this be returned to the Planning Commission first, Planning Commission review, brought to us for our review.
That'll work.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Hold on, I'm confused on, we're making a motion to do what?
Okay, all of the manuals, they say they're...
Wait a minute, could you just go to that slide? Please.
And the reason I ask, because based on what I'm hearing, the manuals are supposed to be, they haven't been completed. They're supposed to come to council, and then at the time they come to council, we send them to Planning Commission.
Next steps.
Let me
Straight
just
to
say
the
one
Planning
thing real
Commission.
quick. The manuals are not in the UDO as a bound manual, but they're referenced, and people who apply for permits or whatever have to comply with those. So if you pull them into the UDO, you have to enact them by the same process, which would require authorization, referral to a Planning Commission, and come back the same way. If you're sending them to the Planning Commission, you probably need to vote on authority. If you want them to come back here before you go to the Planning Commission, then you would do it later. But I thought I heard the mayor say to send them to Planning Commission.
I outlined the steps that
So you
were
don't
recommended.
Okay, so if it's the steps recommended, then they're going to come to us, based on what I'm hearing from this city attorney, they're going to come to us, then go Planning Commission.
No.
If you
But we-
vote today to authorize the changes to
Then
be
they
made.
don't come to us, and they go straight to the
Right.
Planning Commission.
Yes,
Right,
for
that's
their
what you need to
review
vote
and
on.
analysis.
So you're taking out the part of them coming to us first?
Yes.
Okay.
So they can move forward quicker. Then when we get them, they will be fully analyzed by the Planning Commission. By that time, we should have a pretty good product that we can analyze.
Can I have a friendly amendment that the manuals are at least sent to us as council members when they are sent to the Planning Commission?
Yes.
So, okay.
And does that have to be part of the motion?
No, it doesn't have to be part of the motion, but if y'all all, it's fine to do it. You can put it in the motion. The main thing is you need the authority to authorize the changes to send to Planning Commission without
Can we
coming
just
back.
keep the motion as is, and then we'll ask that it be sent to all members of the council?
Okay.
We'll do
upon-
that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right. Next, we have the report and recommendation of the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, flood-prone area regulations.
That's right. That's right. Good afternoon, Mayor and councilors. My name is Jonathan Page. I serve as the chair for the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, and on the behalf of the commission, I would say thank you for the opportunity for us to share our recommendations on potential changes to the city's current floodplain development policies. These recommendations are a response to a motion made by Councilor Stewart that was approved and moved forward back in October of 2018. Specifically, that motion directed the commission to look at and review the city's current floodplain development policies and recommend possible changes to those that would improve the protection for both existing and future development during large flood events. It also specifically asked us to look at considering a prohibition to all new development within the 100-year floodplain. So that motion followed Hurricane Florence, which moved through North Carolina back in September of 2018. At one time within that Hurricane Florence forecast, Raleigh was looking at potentially receiving somewhere between 10 and 15 inches of rainfall, which likely would have led to catastrophic flooding, potential loss of life, and extreme property damage throughout the city. Fortunately, that did not occur. However, what we are aware of and what we do know is that substantially smaller amounts of rainfall can still cause widespread flooding within the city, and that's evidenced by the photo there on the right of Crabtree Creek in the vicinity of Wake Forest Road after about 8 inches of rainfall just in a spring event that occurred in April of 2017. So with that background and introduction, I'm going to turn this over to Wayne Miles, the Stormwater Program Manager, to get into the details of the recommendations that came from the Commission. I'd also like to say, on behalf of the Commission, we really appreciated the staff support on this. They did an excellent job getting us information as we were doing our data gathering, fact-finding, as well as facilitating the process with stakeholders and then reaching out, getting additional community input and communications with folks that will be most affected by potential changes. So thanks, Wayne.
Thank you. Mayor, members of council, thanks for the opportunity to come before you today. I'm Wayne Miles, the Stormwater Program Manager in the Engineering Services Department, and as such, I act as the main staff liaison with the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission. I'd like to take a moment and lead you through the process as illustrated in this diagram, and then I'm going to work through each of these steps one by one so that you understand the thought process that we went through. So this diagram shows, starting with council, moving to the SMAC, or Stormwater Management Advisory Commission, steps in the process. There was a stakeholders involvement process I'll go through in more detail, as well as a community input and communications process to get additional information to support the evaluation and recommendations that came out of this process. So starting with council, as Mr. Page mentioned, back in fall of 2018, following the motion that was made here, this was sent to the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission. The first thing they asked us to do was review the city's current policies and ordinance and do a little background, which I'll lead you through very quickly. Just in terms of terminology, so we are on the same page as we're talking through this. Here's a diagram. A section, if you will, of a creek. And the floodway is the portion of that creek. It can extend beyond the boundary of the channel itself, but in a large flood, that's where water flows. If you're looking at a swollen, flooded creek, that's where you actually see flow moving forward. Versus the floodway fringe, which are the outer portions that will store water. It's usually still, but it will back up and flood into the backwater areas of the creek. And then the entire thing is called the floodplain, the combination of the floodway and the floodway fringe. And I'm introducing those terms because those are the floodway and floodway fringe are specifically the terms referenced in our UDO, so they're important to understand. And this is what the floodplain looks like on a map. These maps are available through the city website. Clicking on the iMaps app from the website, any citizen can pull up an address, type that address in, turn on the floodplain layer, and see where their home or other areas fall within the floodway or the floodplain. So the blue area closest to the creek, following the creek, is the floodway. And then the wider pink area is the floodway fringe, and the entire mapped area is the floodplain. So this represents a typical 1% probability storm, sometimes referred to a 100-year storm, something that would occur on average about every 100 years, but it certainly could happen more frequently with that. And as we are seeing with climate change, these types of storms are tending to happen more frequently. Here are the current regulations as they stand right now. The last change we made was in 2016. Really, the last major change we made was back in 2006. So no fill or obstruction is allowed in the floodway. That's the narrower corridor that I mentioned. And this is a FEMA requirement, so this isn't something we have a local option. to do. In order to be in compliant with FEMA rules, we must restrict development in the floodway. Residential structures, the finished floor must be 2 feet above the 100-year flood elevation, including plumbing, electrical, mechanical. 50% of the floodway fringe can be filled or obstructed. This was a change that was made back in 2006. So while the entire fringe cannot be developed, 50% of that fringe area can be developed on any individual property. And then in 2006, during the last major change, there was an exemption given that parcels of a half acre or less recorded prior to that date of implementation are exempted from the 50% lot coverage under the current ordinance. So if they were platted in half an acre or less before that point, they could put more in the floodway fringe than the 50%. A couple other key points: commercial structures can either be elevated or floodproof. So residential structures have to be elevated. Commercial structures that are in that fringe area can be floodproofed as an alternate. And then all buildings must comply with International Building Code that has to do with raising HVAC and other things above that 100-year floodplain. So those are the current regulations. So SMAC had asked staff to help facilitate a stakeholders process to get input from some of the major stakeholders that could be impacted by regulation changes. We put together a group of participants along with SMAC, got representatives in each of these areas, commercial developers, environmental advocacy groups, engineers, residential property owner, Home Builders Association was involved, State Emergency Management, Regional Association Realtors, Floodplain staff from Wake County. This group met 7 times over the course of the spring and summer last year and put together a number of recommendations. They did ask for additional information from the community, and so we assisted in doing some outreach related to that. Here's what that looked like. Specifically, they wanted to hear from people who lived in the floodplain. So we were able to use our GIS mapping capabilities and overlay the floodplain with the water department's customer database. So anyone that had an address and received a water and sewer bill, we did a direct mailing of a card asking for their input. It was over 3,000 cards that were sent out, and we got a pretty good response. We also got the message out online, social media, through our email channels, as well as engaged with a number of news media agencies who gave us additional coverage to get the word out that we're seeking input on the floodplain rules. So here's a graphic of the responses. We got about 420 responses, and you can see that those responses, because they were targeted along the floodplain, specifically the mailings, you can see that the major Crabtree corridor through here, we got responses. Walnut Creek corridor, we got responses. Neuse River, we got responses. And then a couple of these other corridors that have tributaries to Crabtree Creek, we have responses as well. And here's some summary of the key aspects of this, the responses that we received. 72% live in or near the floodplain, so that's not surprising. That was really our target audience. 54% were not familiar with the city's floodplain regulations. So obviously that leads us to, there's some education, information, outreach that is required to help inform our citizens on what this means. And what the regulations really are. And then 70% said that they either don't know or feel neutral about the current floodplain regulations. So again, some opportunities for education. Now, we did get some feedback from folks. 14% were dissatisfied, 8% were very dissatisfied with the floodplain regulations. Looking at the comments, it was mixed. There was a lot of support for making those regulations more stringent. There were a number of comments, though, concerned with individual property rights and that they did not believe that the regulations should be changed. In some cases, they thought that the regulations should be less stringent than they are now. So there was a mix, but there was definitely quite a bit of support for strengthening the regulations. So we took that information, brought it back to the stakeholders group. They used that as long as other information. We had Dr. Dahl from NC State, a water quality expert, come and present to the group on the processes, natural benefits of floodplains and other information to help support that process. And then the stakeholders put together recommendations to the Stormwater Management Advisory Commission. The commission reviewed those and for the most part took those same recommendations and is sending those here to City Council for further consideration. So here's a summary of those recommendations. The first of which is exemptions. And now you'll recall in 2006 there was an exemption process whereby small lots who had already been subdivided should be exempt moving forward. This stakeholders group felt like a similar exemption should take place for with any changes here, so that small lots would continue to fall under the regulations as they are right now, or those that were in place prior to 2006 should continue to keep that exemption. Okay. The other exemption is existing development. So for an example, a commercial property that had development, as long as it was not subdivided, it could stay as it is and be redeveloped using similar characteristics as it is now, as long as it was not subdivided. And then parcels that meet one or both of those exemptions could be recombined into a single parcel and also keep the exemption. That could be a consideration in some large commercial development that have out parcels that they would want to recombine moving forward. So probably the most significant recommendation is the stakeholders group and SMAC agreed to recommend restricting new development in the floodway fringe. So the way this being proposed to do this is there are development restrictions in the floodway right now, as I'd mentioned. Those same restrictions would be extended to the floodway fringe. And let me review what those are to give you an idea. And these are not exhaustive lists, but it gives you an idea of the restrictions. So the floodway right now, and these would be extended to the floodway fringe, prohibits fill, new construction structures, manufactured homes, chemical storage facilities, solid waste disposal, hazardous waste facilities. Those are examples of what's prohibited in the floodway, and under the proposal would be also prohibited in the floodway fringe. Now, allowed uses in the floodway now would continue to be allowed there and in the fringe: farming, pasture, plants or nurseries, wildlife sanctuaries, lawns, gardens, parking areas, play areas, bikeways, greenway trails, other recreational uses. So those are allowed now and would continue to be allowed under the proposed changes. Let me give you some examples. This is a zoom in of the map. So we have situations where properties like this one right here is 100% in the floodway. So under the current rules, there's no development allowed, or development is restricted, as I described previously, as the rules are right now. As proposed, that development restriction would extend to the fringe. So this parcel, for example, is partially in the floodway, partially in the fringe, but under the proposal, that property would be 100% impacted by the proposed changes restricting development. Now, there are a number of other parcels that are partially impacted. Here's several here that touch the floodway fringe, and so under the proposal, there could be no development in the fringe area, but development could occur on the remainder of the property. And one of the stakeholder recommendations that's detailed in the memo is they ask that consideration be given to shifting density that was not allowed in the fringe to the remainder of the parcel where that could be done practically. So basically, within that parcel, transferring the density of the development rights from the portion in the floodplain to the remainder of the property that was outside the floodplain. And that was an important consideration that was requested by the group. So here's a summary of the properties that are impacted by these proposed rules. We've done an extensive GIS analysis throughout the city, overlaying the floodway and the floodway fringe. And the green areas are the areas that are most important here. So we have this row is all floodplain properties in the city. But then we've taken out the ones that are exempted, the half-an-acre parcels, the ones that are already developed, and that's where we get this row. The 10 parcels are in the floodway. They're already restricted under the current rules, so that's the 92 acres. Here's the new ones as proposed, 44 additional parcels, about 198 acres would be fully impacted. Okay, so these are the parcels that were 100% in the floodway and the floodway fringe. So that would be restricted under the proposed rules. Next table, I'm sorry, just to give you an idea of what that looks like as a percentage of the entire city, it's a relatively small fraction, 0.17% of all the property in the city. So relatively small impacts there. Here are partially impacted. So these are the ones, and they're divided into 3 groups. Properties that are 75 to 100% in the floodway and fringe, 50 to 75. Those are the more impacted, and these are the impacted but less impacted. Less than 50% of the parcel would be in the fringe. And here's some numbers. Again, the green are the new properties that would be impacted. They are, the exempted properties are removed, so this does not include the ones that are half an acre or less. This does not include the ones that are already developed. These are undeveloped, privately held properties. This does also not include properties that are held in conservation easements by HOAs. The city does already own a lot of property that is in the floodway and the floodplain, so those are all taken out. So these are private floodplain property with the exempted properties removed. These are the most impacted, 75 to 100%, 50 to 75%, and impacted but less impacted, 242 parcels. I'm sorry, here's, so, and these are the percentages of those. Again, and I realize this is a lot of information to absorb all at once. I'm just trying to give you a flavor for the impacts. We can provide more maps, details as needed. Don't expect you to absorb all of this information at once. So some additional potential changes. Stormwater Management Advisory Commission recommended the UDO be changed to require new development to maintain dry access in new public roads put in as part of a development. So this is an access issue during a large storm that public roads would be designed to not flood during the 100-year storm. So this is a change in our ordinance as well. And a quick mention of the community rating system, because the dry access as well as the new development restriction would help the city in terms of what's called our community rating system. This is under the National Flood Insurance Program, a way of getting rating. Right now we do not have a rating. Staff has already been working on getting a rating. This type of changes to our UDO would help our rating become better, and a lower number is better. And the result of this rating is that everyone in the city would get a discount on his or her flood insurance as a result of this rating. So there are some benefits and some value to the community of putting in place more restrictions in terms of floodplain management. Okay, on the home stretch, some additional recommendations. One recommendation is related to flooding for a volunteer hazard mitigation buyout program. There are a number of communities that have similar programs, Charlotte being one of them. And this came out of the recommendation of how to address existing development that we have in the floodplain. We, the city, have done buyouts in the past. It's primarily been associated with post-large events where FEMA money was available, and we had matching money to do buyouts, but the city has done some of that. There are some restrictions on the FEMA money, that having a local funding buyout would give us matching money, as well as give us some flexibility on how to do the buyouts. For example, if we so choose, we could do vacant property and buy it before it were developed, whereas the FEMA program is only for developed property after it's been flooded. A couple more changes incorporate language into the UDO that allows restricted access. This is going to help our citizens give more access to the cost FEMA's Federal Flood Insurance Program Cost of Compliance Program. That's a benefit to the community. And then lastly, and this is one, develop more floodplain communication and education, regardless of the path forward here based on the results of the survey. And we have been doing some of this, but we need to continue to educate our community, provide more outreach, especially to those who live in the floodplain, as to what the risks are. As an example, when Florence was heading our way, we did a GIS analysis, got the database from the water department, and did a reverse 911 call or text to everyone in the floodplain to warn them that they were in a flood-prone area and that flooding could be imminent. And we got a lot of calls on that, and I think that's a good thing because people were worried. There was a lot of very quick education that went out as a result of that, but obviously more is needed based on the survey results. So here we are. SMAC has sent these recommendations back to the City Council for your consideration. We are here and available to answer any other questions, getting other additional information as you consider the path forward. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Whew. That was a report.
I loved every second of it. Thank you.
Well, very important topic, and a lot of effort went into this, and thank you for your leadership, Councilor Stewart. So first off, I'm going to ask if anybody has questions, but if you do, then I'm going to say you weren't paying attention.
Oh, I have questions.
Uh-oh. All right. Go, Councilor Stewart.
So I have two specific questions that one is a clarification, and really just kind of an educational piece. My understanding is that with these, if we were to move forward with these changes, that there would be no new impacts to current development that aren't already in place by the federal government. Is that accurate?
Yes, that is correct. If a current property subdivided, then the subdivided part of the property would be subject to the new regulations, but current development would not be. That's correct.
Great. And then we hear a lot, and even read about it today in the News and Observer, about the need to update our flood maps and how we're always behind in our flood mapping. And that is not specific to Raleigh, of course. The North Carolina's Office of Resiliency and Recovery just came out with information today talking about that. So I'm wondering if you can kind of talk us through that process and what that means for us and our dated flood maps.
Yes, so flood maps are managed by the state, Emergency Management Division, following the FEMA processes, and that modeling is done externally that develops and determines where the floodplain is drawn on maps. There are new maps that are coming out, and that has been a delayed process, and the latest that we hear is it will be 2021 before the new maps come out. The significance of that is that in Crabtree Creek in particular, we do expect the new floodplain maps, once they are officially released, to make flood elevations go down, possibly several feet in Crabtree Creek. So there are implications to that, and I can get into the details of why that is at another time if you wish. But that is a process that's managed by the state at this point in time. Now, there has been some discussion that if we step up as a technical partner of FEMA and take over some of the mapping, we would have more control over that. But given our current situation, that is, we're at the state's liberty to do that.
Great. I'm interested if others have questions before I
do.
talk.
Councilor Martin?
So my head is spinning with so many things. I just have one thread of, I'm just going to go with one thread of comments. And if you kind of commented on this at the beginning, forgive me. When was the floodplain that is designated, when was it last updated in terms of the federal government's designation? When was it last updated?
Yeah. Ben, do you know the year of the last maps? Yeah, come. Sorry. Ben Brown is our floodplain manager in the stormwater management.
Great, thank you.
Hi. Good afternoon. Yeah, the last major map update we had was the same time as we updated our flood regulations back in May of 2006. So
2006?
Yes, 2006. So, yeah.
Okay, so we're working off of maps based off of 2006, and that came from the federal government or the state?
Through the state of North Carolina, but yes.
And then what is our ability at the city level to extend the floodway fringe lines? Meaning, between 2006 and now, we're in a completely different moment, as you noted, and the lines that exist likely do not encompass the potential effects that we're going to see within the next 10 years, likely the next 20. And so my concern is being forward-thinking. What is the most pessimistic outcome we could perceive? We likely don't need to necessarily govern for that per se, but let's have that option and talk about it maybe. And I'm wondering what restrictions we have from looking at that, and if we're hamstrung either at the state level or the federal level from expanding.
So a lot of issues, very good question. One point I think it's important, the city does regulate on the projected future land use. So when we do our modeling, we assume that future development based on land use is already in place, fully developed. Okay, so that's a little bit conservative in that that's going to be a higher floodplain elevation. So that helps. Now, in terms of rising the flood elevation, yes, that is in our control. That was one of the proposals that was given to the stakeholders. To give an additional buffer of 2 feet above the floodplain elevation and extend the floodplain out that distance. And the stakeholders did vote against recommending that as a recommendation, but it is something that's within our power, and it was discussed as part of the stakeholders process.
Okay, that's interesting. That's a lot to take in. Just thinking about 2006 and where we are now, and not wanting to look back and think that we could have done something. So thank you for getting us here, and I just want to be thinking about 10, 20 years from now.
Any additional questions?
A few. Thank you. And first question, for the people that are most impacted by this change, are we planning some special communication? Are we reaching out to them? Have they, particularly the 77 people who between 75 and 100% of their property will be unbuildable? What are we doing to let them know this is happening?
Yes, absolutely. And that was a clear recommendation of the stakeholders group as well as SMAC, was to outreach specifically to the people most impacted. So we can do a similar GIS overlay. We have their contact information. We do plan to outreach specifically to those that are impacted fully and partially as part of any process moving forward.
Great, thanks. And a second point, overall, I think this is important. Probably a lot of people wish we did this 30 years ago. Stormwater runoff and soil erosion are some of the things I hear most about from the folks I represent in District A. I am, however, a little concerned about unintended consequences. There may be some developments in proposal right now that would be affected by this. There may be some public projects. I'll just, as a hypothetical, perhaps a waterfront park in Midtown that might be affected. I know parks are permitted to use, but we need buildings that go along with them, restrooms, benches, things like that. Are you all thinking, that may be more detail than what you would have wanted to bring to us today, but are you all paying attention to those types of issues that maybe aren't exactly on the surface?
We are, and specifically, we've had some conversations with the planning department as part of the Midtown study, looking at some of those areas and the implications. Much of that area is developed already and would be redeveloped, so under the exemption as proposed, the developed property would not be impacted by the new rules as long as it was not subdivided. Also important to add is under the existing rules as well as the proposed new rules, there is a variance process, and the city attorney's office tells us that having available a variance process where a property owner could, under special hardship, gain a variance from these rules, that's an important part of the process to have open as well moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Couple specific questions. One, looking at the properties impacted, I'm trying to figure out the percentage of exempted properties. That's left out, or do you have a round number of what's the percentage of properties that are within this range but that are exempted based on this new regulation?
Yes, I can do some quick math. So, are you mentioning the ones that are fully impacted or partially impacted?
It doesn't have a number here. It's just properties fully impacted by restricting new development in the floodway fringe. You have number of parcels, 45, then you have 10, but that's after the exempted property was removed. So I was just wondering how many. Is it a low percentage, high percentage?
A high percentage are exempted. So the 633 right here are the total floodplain property. 40, taking out the exemptions leaves 44. So what is that about?
I wasn't sure if I was reading that correctly. Okay, so that the difference is the exempted property.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Commercial parking lots in floodways, can they be transitioned into other types of commercial property within a floodplain? Would they be considered exempted?
So if it was already developed?
Was a parking lot as part of a commercial development?
So in the floodway, which if they were a commercial parking lot, they would currently be an at-grade use. So that would stay consistent with that floodway rules restriction that comes from FEMA. Now, if we were talking about in the floodway fringe as far as what their development rights were there, I mean, that's something we could further clarify. But when they were looking at development through the stakeholder and the SMAC process, it was more about like buildings and fill and that sort of thing. But if that parking lot was something we need to put in, I think we need to be clear on that to make sure that was put in there.
And also, if that parking lot could become a future building.
Correct.
So
correct.
Maybe clarification on that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was a major talk at the stakeholder group about the definition of development. Yes. So yes, so
that goes into some of that work along there.
Crabtree Creek.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say, it seems like you've had a thorough process, and you've had, which, you know, I think a lot of us want and expect is to have the stakeholders at the table, making sure they're all there and working with the experts, meaning y'all, the staff, on this. So I think y'all have done that, and I appreciate that work. And I appreciate, Jonathan, you taking this on as the new chair. Look forward, I'm taking over as the new liaison, so looking forward to working with SMAC and Wayne and the staff as we work through this. These are difficult, tough processes. But y'all, it looks like y'all covered your bases, and I appreciate that and look forward to working with y'all. Thank y'all.
Any additional questions? Okay. Councilor Stewart.
Thank you. I am thrilled with this work. I am really excited about what's to come next from hopefully what I think is coming, in how this plays into Raleigh's story on climate resilience. So while staff, I want to make sure that two things kind of happen here in tandem. One, to Mr. Buffman's point about making sure that impacted property owners are continued to be engaged and informed during our next steps in this process. That we also authorize staff to initiate the UDO text change process to begin drafting changes to the flood-prone area regulations as recommended by the SMAC, as outlined in their memo to City Council dated January 13th, 2020, and to make other formatting changes to make the regulations more readable and understandable.
Second.
I would just like to add to, in addition to the outreach, I like an understanding what the financial impacts could be for the city. Okay. All right, we have a motion and a
To
second.
be clear, can that come back to us before it goes to Planning Commission? Does that need to be a part of that motion?
Just tell us whichever way you want it.
So to have all of that information, including mayor's request, come back to, and the proposed text change come back to us before we send it to Planning Commission. Thank you.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. Great work.
Thank you.
All right, next is public comment. We will start. Before we start, I just want to remind everybody, did you have something? No? Okay. I just want to remind everybody that you have 3 minutes to speak. The timer will be set. We do have rules of decorum, and we ask everybody to engage civilly. And we will start this today with Chris Teleska. Okay, guess Mr. Teleska is not here. Next is Steph Mendel.
Hi, Steph Mendel, 3225 Oak Grove Circle. When I spoke before council at your last meeting, Mr. Martin attempted to counter my arguments with whataboutism. Rather than defend this council's action to plot in secret and ambush a fellow council member, he specifically accused me and some of my fellow council members with ambushing the former mayor and usurping her authority to make committee assignments. I guess he was arguing that two wrongs make a right, except that what he said happened 2 years ago simply isn't true. Mayor McFarland wasn't out of the loop. Russ Stevenson had been in discussions with her over the course of several days before our first scheduled council meeting. They had made some progress in negotiating committee assignments, and Russ implored her to hold off on a vote while the discussions continued. She refused and went into the meeting knowing she didn't have the votes. And while it is customary for the mayor to make committee assignments, there's ample precedent for council members to overturn those assignments. In fact, Mayor Baldwin was a party to one of those precedents during her past service on council. Also at the last council meeting, several of you quoted a statistic that more than 90% of Raleigh residents said they'd never attended a CAC meeting. That figure is from the 2016 survey. The 2018 survey shows 25% or thereabouts of respondents had attended at least one CAC meeting during the previous year. If you think the survey is a good instrument, use the latest data. If you don't base decisions on it. Furthermore, in 2012, a city staffer was quoted in the News and Observer as saying, "We're not trying to get 1,000 people to CAC meetings. We're trying to make sure we get representatives from all the neighborhoods that make up the CAC who can go back and push that information out to the rest of the people." Of the 7 CAC meetings scheduled last week, there were a total of 4 zoning presentations on their agendas. But there were also presentations about the homeless, the census, the city budget, parks projects, and transit. What's especially concerning is in the motion you passed, it specifically says to make it clear that the Planning Commission should not ask council to extend the time it has to consider any case in anticipation of a CAC vote or new UDO provisions, which could add an additional neighborhood meeting in the future. That seems to leave the door wide open to rush through rezoning requests while we wait for the new and improved engagement process, which could add an additional meeting in the future. It's not comfortable to publicly admit that you've made a mistake, but listen to the public outcry that you've generated. Reinstate the CACs. Let's work together to improve them, but let's not abandon them and leave nothing in their place.
Part of the rules of decorum asks that there be no applauding or cheering, because people do disagree. So it asks that the audience refrain from that. Ryan Parker is next. Is Mr. Parker here? Okay, next we have Peggy Seymour.
For you to pass around, and this is for you to keep. Okay, my name is Peggy Seymour. I live at 3125 Stanhope Avenue. I'm here to talk about the cell tower property, and it doesn't belong to me, but I'm still here to talk about it. You will be getting a sheet here that shows where the cell tower is on Rosemary Street. You can share if you don't mind. I don't have but 5. And then I had an additional thing to talk to you about the city. You can read over it. Then the next one shows a picture of the current standard being built by Landmark, and I have taken their drawing and dotted in a line down here where the cell tower is to show that's where the existing fence is around the cell tower, and that if you extend over the recessed parking and sidewalk that's going to be at the standard, you can see that there is enough room on Rosemary Street to have that. In addition to that, I have attached 3 things. I love your click fix. Anyway, I have yet heard back from them. I did it about a month ago. One is about a tree. There are 3 trees in front of the cell tower, of which one of them in the middle needs to come down if the recessed parking will go in there. And so I like to have that tree man was here. Maybe I should speak to him. But anyway, to start with, I want to thank the City Council for continuing to have this petition to speak before the City Council as part of their agenda. I'd also like to thank the City Council from previous years. About 5 years ago, I spoke, and I got my dumpsters out of Friendly Drive in Yarborough, and also out of the end of Concord Street, and I do thank you for doing that. I did discover that my number 2 that I had submitted about the easement for the land that the cell tower would have to give, it's actually a county problem, so I'll have to switch over and forget that for right now. But I would like to ask if there is a staff member that works with the county easement people in coordinating the city easements, if they could contact me and let me know how they do it, I would appreciate that. Then I am here to speak about asking about grandfathering in a 4-foot existing sidewalk. I understand there's some new rule that I didn't know about, and so, and I meant to print out this other sheet of paper that I've emailed all of you an email that has the PDF in it that shows you how small the area is. Also, I'd like to find out about if there is any way to fast track any kind of recessed parking permit to match that what is going to be done by Landmark. And also I would like to find out what I can do about all the curbs and gutters that have been destroyed over the last 3 building projects, and also and then the removal of that trees. And so I guess that's all I can say. But if
Peggy,
you will, let me know.
Your time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. But will you recommend some staff members?
So what I'm going to ask, City Manager, can we have, get a report on this, or is there?
Sure. We will reach out to Ms. Seymour, and we will send you a report on these topics. We've engaged Ms. Seymour before on this topic, and we'll be happy to do so. So staff will reach out to you.
Okay. Thank you.
He'll email me, because I've emailed several times and haven't referred.
We'll be sure to get in touch with you, I promise. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Brandy McNeil. Brandy McNeil. Okay, Linda Smith.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Linda Smith, 3128 McAdams Drive. I'm here to talk to you this afternoon about two topics of interest to me: the CAC disbandment and the Brentwood Sewer Project. The CAC disbandment. If something is broken, you fix it. What was the rationale in the hasty shutdown of the CACs? I don't buy the excuse that the funds were needed to support exploring the system, the new system, because it was a paltry amount that was being spent to fund the CACs. Why not leave the CACs in place, continue the financial support while concurrently exploring the improvements to the existing system? Instead, Council has backpedaled and said, well, you can still meet, but you've left neighborhoods scrambling to figure out where the funds are going to come from for the facilities to hold the meetings, as well as making it more difficult for city services to come out to speak at the meetings. So the message that comes across is that Council really doesn't want to hear from us, and you really don't want us to coming together as communities. I've worked in the corporate world where I experienced disastrous fallout from such rip the Band-Aid off tactics. They've failed. So I really urge you to reinstate the CACs along with the financial support while the new system and/or improvements are being explored. Okay, the Brentwood Sewer Project. I love trees, I love wildlife. Last month, a vote occurred that will result in the destruction of many of the Brentwood trees, as well as habitats for the eagles and other wildlife, despite the fact that there was an alternative option for the placement of the sewer line. Council went with what was recommended. It would not allow the affected homeowners to speak at that council meeting. And that option would have actually allowed the trees to have been saved and those habitats to be saved. So again, I urge you to take another vote on this to try to save those trees and save those habitats. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Donna Bailey.
I want to address the way this council handled the elimination of CACs. As a CAC chair, I've seen all the good things that happen at CACs, too much to say in just 3 minutes, but much more than just rezonings. This council says it wants more resident engagement, yet you disbanded an established voice for residents with no resident input, all done in secret behind closed doors. The way you handled this says a lot about how you govern and questions your ability to govern. Even if your goal was to disband CACs, why did you have to do it with nothing else in place? Abolishing the CACs has left a vacuum that may or may not be filled. Since the Citizen Engagement Task Force 2 years ago, which Councilor Brandt's referenced, where I attended all 10 meetings, the CACs have made improvements on their own that were recommendations from the task force. Has the city done anything to help the CACs improve and increase outreach? The answer is no. By the way, the consultant that was hired for that task force was so bad he was fired halfway through the process. How will you choose another consultant and not have the same results? Will residents be allowed to participate? They certainly weren't last time. I think that using the last Citizen Engagement Task Force as a basis is wrong because there was no citizen participation. If one of your concerns was about reaching more people, you need to take a look at your own elections. Out of 315,000 registered voters, only 7% voted for Mayor Baldwin. Is that good participation? Is 7% a mandate to change an institution that's been a voice of Raleigh citizens for almost 50 years? I know Councilor Stewart has started a new poll about what is the best way to get resident engagement. How about reading the poll that I distributed that the city of Raleigh paid for in 2018 that shows that 24% of Raleigh residents had participated in a CAC at least once in the past year. 24% is more than 3 times larger than 7%. I've spoken to several planning commission members, and they said their job is now going to be harder and that the input from the CACs was very valuable. Maybe you'd like to disband the planning commission too. Councilor Stewart said that funds were needed to be freed up. How many funds? Nobody's been able to get that answer. The support staff will still be city employees. The relatively modest outlay is more than offset by the hundreds of hours of citizen volunteers bringing to the community conversation and the value that they add to the outcomes. If this is how the new city council will be conducting business, in secret, behind closed doors, hidden from the agenda, and not informing all councilors, Raleigh is in deep trouble. I've just got one more.
Your time is up, Ms.
You were
Bailey.
elected to represent the interests and rights of all Raleigh stakeholders. That is your job. You have
Your
bitterly
time
failed
is
Raleigh
up.
on both of these issues.
Time is up. Next time, you will be asked to sit down and could be removed. Thank you. Eugene Weeks. Counselor?
Good afternoon to the mayor and council members. It's kind of funny standing up here talking to you as a former city council, but I'm representing the South CAC. I'm the chair of that CAC, and they gave me some points just to bring to you from them. So it's not from me, it is from the citizens of that CAC. And it have to do with the disbanding of the CACs. More than anything, the CACs are involved in more than just the zoning and rezoning cases that we hear. Some of the things they told me to bring to you, remember that the CAC members and citizens are not only involved in their meetings, but they're outside of their meetings taking care of things. They do not call the city all the time. There need to be trash picked up. The citizens in that CAC take care of some of the streets, cleaning up the parks and different things. So it's not only about just zoning, it's about what we are doing on the outside. Someone mentioned about the homeless and different things and what we are doing to help them get off the street and different things within our area. I like the Community Engagement Department report because in their report, they not only talked about what they were doing, but they were also talking about how the community and the citizens were being engaged in what was going on in that department. So we keep talking about there's no engagement. There's always engagement. And one of the engagements is that we are involved with everything that's involved with the city. We spread the word about our CAC meetings and the importance for people to attend. I talked to Councilman Branch. Yes, in different areas, you have different variables that work before people coming to CACs. In Southeast Raleigh CAC, some people have 2 and 3 jobs that they go to. They're not able to attend the CAC, but we do get information and we do mail out the agenda to them. Report the crime to our police officer. But we also have what we call a outstanding community watch program in most of the communities in the South CAC, and they help a whole lot. The South CAC citizen felt that there was an injustice to the citizen when you disband the CAC. We want to thank Mayor Baldwin and Councilman Branch, who met with some of the Southeast Raleigh CAC concerned citizens Saturday. So we want to thank you for that. That's the kind of interaction that we are talking about when you meet with people. And we like for more city council members and people to get involved with your citizens. Come to the CAC. If you don't do nothing but just introduce yourself, let them know who you are. And we are having problems, even with the problems that we are having. We would just want you to be
Councilor
involved.
Weeks,
Thank you.
your time is up. Thank you. I remember you having to tell people that at certain times. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Next, we have Susan Maruyama. Thank you.
My name is Susan Maruyama. I live at 3413 Lewis Farm Road in Raleigh. Let's face it, you couldn't have picked a worse time to pull the Band-Aid off and abolish the CACs. Does the outrage you've experienced really surprise you? Just think back to the moment in our lives and what was happening to all of us a couple of weeks ago when you did what you did. With our eyes and ears witnessing in real time an unbelievable disaster unfolding in Washington, our democracy was crumbling before our eyes, and we were very frustrated and angry and, yes, outraged. So you can understand then when you pulled the caper you did to get rid of the CACs, as imperfect as they were, without allowing citizens a voice in the process, you were met with alarm and outrage. Now, I'm not going to spend my whole 3 minutes complaining about it. Lots of others have, and I think you're getting the message. What I'd like to do is spend the rest of my time talking about some positive steps that I think you could take that would help you reach your goal and bring the community back on your side. First of all, you'd have to have the courage to vote to reinstate the community action committees, because it will give you a basis from which you can build and help develop a more robust and inclusive community engagement strategy, and because it's the right thing to do. The second thing you could do is during the next 90 days, every council member should meet with every CAC in your district and learn firsthand what the issues are and how the CACs are functioning in your district. With that knowledge, you will begin to be able to communicate better about what the civic engagement process is, and you'll also be able to begin to build back the trust that you've lost with your citizens. And may I suggest, if you do this, if you meet with the CACs, that you invest some money in a multimedia campaign to encourage attendance. This would include not only print, but online and social media. You're going to have to do this to drive attendance to anything these days. And so I would suggest, if you will meet with them, you will learn a lot. I can't say the third one, but it's...
we have your comments here, and we
yeah,
can
you
check
can look at my
those.
comments. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Sadie Gilbert.
Good afternoon. My name is Sade Gilbert. I'm at 3509 Midway Island Court.
I'm a homeowner in Battle Ridge North and a member of the Southeast CAC. I serve as the social media coordinator for the CAC. My main mission is to bridge the social media divide and target my cohorts via Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor, and other multimedia outlets to inform them of things happening in our community. I'm here today because the decision to abolish the CACs has impacted my community, and I'm here to give voice to the impacts that you all may not see. I'm not here to argue if there are improvements that can be made to the CACs because they could always be better. As we know, roughly 68 people are moving to Raleigh a day, and our city has seen enormous growth. The development and growth that is happening is right in my neighborhood in Southeast Raleigh. By abolishing the CACs, those of a more senior age group miss out on the opportunity to voice their concerns about the changes happening in a community that they've lived in for over 50 years and have helped build. By abolishing the CACs, it leaves the Black community without a voice against gentrification. As developers gentrify without checks and balances from the CAC, those that look like me are being pushed and priced out of Raleigh and into Johnson County, Wendell, Zebulon, and other smaller communities because of the lack of affordable housing. I implore you to reverse the vote that was taken in secrecy to restore the trust that Southeast Raleigh lost in the City Council. I implore you to let those that live in Southeast Raleigh get to voice their opinions on rezoning cases in our community. We would like to work with the consultant to make the CACs better and increase community engagement. Just because a house has some faults, you don't tear down the house. You fix the house so it retains its equity. I have equity, and we have equity in Southeast Raleigh, and restoring the CACs will give us our voice back. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Holt Browning. Following that will be Mac Paul and then Lynn Hebe.
I'll talk about the floodplain. All right, my name is Holt Browning, and I live at 300 Marlowe Road. Crabtree Creek is my eastern border of my property. I've lived there since 1997. I've been through Fran and all the weather events for the past 24 years. The weather is not my biggest fear. It is the endless assault on my property rights because I live in the floodplain. I attended all the stakeholder meetings, but given the makeup of the group, it was clear from the start that reducing flooding was not their priority. They were only looking for ways to stop development in the floodplain. Their expert in the floodplain, Dr. Barbara Dahl, actually called development in the floodplain, and I quote, a bunch of crap. I reminded Dr. Dahl with my 3 minutes after the meeting that the crap she was talking about was actually my home. In 2006, new rules were enacted that made it so we could only fill 50% of our lot. This one got by us. In 2010, TC 4-10 was proposed. The property owners protested, and the matter was unanimously voted down by the council. And a statement from the council was, TC 4-10 places most of the responsibility for flood hazard on a relatively small group of downstream property owners adjacent to the waterways. Now, in 2019, again, we're being targeted for a problem we are not responsible for. FEMA developed new floodplain maps in 2015. They have not been adopted, but at my home, the 100-year flood elevation will actually drop 6.4 feet. The reason for the Crabtree Creek basing being lowered is that they took into account that Umstead Park was not going to be developed. All the development in the floodplain had no impact on the 100-year flood elevation. The development of the land above us is the driving factor for additional flooding. As long as there's development above us, the increased risk of flooding will grow. We know you will not stop new development, but please stop targeting us for a problem we are not responsible for. If you feel we are the solution, then buy us out. These encumbrances you place on our properties serve only to destroy our property values and punish us for something we are not responsible for. The city continues to dump thousands of yards of dirt in the floodplain for greenways, and they build bridges for greenways. The bridge on the greenway at my house will back up water almost a mile to Lassiter Mill Road, as per a letter from the Corps of Engineers. This was considered negligible to the Corps, and the bridges were built. Rest assured, the building being done by individuals has far less impact than this bridge. Last night on WRAL, I learned that a new Midtown project by the city, part of this project is a water destination on Old Wake Forest Road. Feel a little bit this is kind of hypocritical in that you're wanting to build more stuff in the floodway when you're telling us not to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Mac Paul.
Good afternoon, Mac Paul, 421 Fayetteville Street. I've alerted a couple of you to an issue, but I wanted to bring it before the council and get direction on moving forward. For those of you who are new to council, there was a text change adopted last year dealing with the regulations of attics and basements. Took a long time to review it and approve it. Late in that process, there was a definition of mezzanine added to the text change that was adopted. And basically the difference between the Raleigh UDO definition and the building code definition is that the Raleigh definition says there can only be one in a building on the ground level, and it could be 33% of the entire footprint, whereas the building code says it's 33% with individual units within the building. And if it meets that, it's not counted as an additional story. There's a building being constructed right now that runs afoul of this, one that was approved and is being marketed successfully, and one that's in review right now, all of which are having a problem with this. I've been working with staff on a potential solution through an amendment to the definition of mezzanine, but I wanted to bring it to you because we would like to potentially tag it on to TC 120, which is dealing with several issues at Planning Commission right now, one of which is building heights. And the reason I'm asking is there is this pending development approval it's dead in the water essentially right now because of this issue. And if we can resolve it relatively soon, they'll be able to not have to totally redesign the building. And again, there are other projects that have already been approved pre-text change that would be non-conforming with the UDO. So I would respectfully ask if you would consent that we could bring it forward at the Planning Commission. If not, I could address it at the City Council when the text change gets to you. Otherwise, we'd have to introduce it independently as a new text change.
So this is prohibiting...
Basically, you can't have a penthouse unit. You could only have one mezzanine on the ground level of a building. So
you can't have a mezzanine on the top floor?
Correct.
Okay. That's why most people would want to buy a penthouse.
Right, and there's one project, that was inspired by a symposium on pushing better architectural design that is being, running afoul of this. So these are a popular amenity now for condominiums.
Okay.
Could we get some details before we make a decision?
I'm just alerting you to it so that it's not a surprise. I would ask, in working with Ken Bowers on potential language, but it would come before you to see obviously what that amendment might look like. But again, we would like to try to speed the process a little bit by addressing it as part of the pending text change, so it comes together as part of that package rather than starting a new process that could take several months.
So where does that text change stand?
It's in Planning Commission.
Well, I was looking at Robin.
I'm not sure. We had changed this text change authorization thing to go to special items so that staff could comment on it. So I've not seen it. I'm aware of an interpretation. So if you want to, you can. You may want to ask the planners what they think about it, though, as opposed to me. But you would need authorization to tag it on to something else. But normally we would have a staff memo or some kind of reaction to it.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Bowers.
So, at issue is what counts as a story when we look at measuring the height of a building. And the UDO has certain provisions for types of floor space within a building that don't count as a story. Basements, if they're entirely below grade. Mezzanines, if they're above the first floor and don't occupy more than a third of the footprint of the building, which is a different definition than how the building code deals with mezzanines. The request here is to allow an additional level of living space within a residential unit on a floor above the ground floor, which would allow, which would meet the building code definition of a mezzanine. It would allow buildings to be somewhat taller than they would otherwise be if you counted that as a story, because it wouldn't count towards the story count. So you would have on the top level of a building, and say a 4-story zoning district, a unit at the top that would have living space that's above that would look in some cases like a 5th floor from the exterior, but it wouldn't meet the definition of a story under the building code. And if we were to add the similar definition to the code, it wouldn't meet the definition of a story under the UDO. Within the 3, 4, and 5-story zoning districts, they would still be subject to the maximum height in feet, which we're adjusting with a pending text change right now in front of Planning Commission for the 4 and 5-story categories. Above that level for in the 7 and higher zoning categories, since we recently eliminated the height in feet, then there would be no particular restriction on that. My understanding of the request is simply to revise our approach to mezzanines to allow them on floors other than the first floor of the building, but only one such mezzanine level per building.
Okay, so would it make sense, Mr. Bowers, to include discussion on this along with TC 120?
While that could potentially move things faster, this is relatively new. The only reason to do that outside of doing it as a separate text change is simply the thought that it could be quicker. But the text change they're asking for is not horribly complicated and is not necessarily directly related to the items that are being discussed in TC 118, other than the fact that, or 920, other than the fact that it would probably be more likely for a residential building to start pushing the limits of the maximum height and feet in the 3, 4, and 5-story categories were this to be approved. So, but that's a separate question from the discussion as to what the appropriate maximum height and feet, and the council's already made a determination that raising those by a few feet is appropriate. So I think staff would have a mild preference for a separate text change as a more cleaner approach, that we're starting with a new topic and a new text change and running that through the process, but that would take a little bit longer potentially than appending it to an existing. How much longer? I mean, if you authorize it now, I would guess that it would probably, we would want to meet with them, work out some draft language, and then bring it to Planning Commission. I think it would take another 2 to 4 weeks.
And so where are we now with TC 120?
Ask Mark Holland to give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That text change is scheduled to go before the Planning Commission at their next public meeting, which is next Tuesday.
Can you notice it still? Can you get it on the board docs still? I guess that's the question. I think you were going to do it today, Frey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're ready to put language on board docs for the Planning Commission. They would also, I think the idea was that they would attend Planning Commission and suggest that this be added to the text change and part of the recommendation to come back. That would be, obviously, because the public hearing has not been noticed yet, because you have not received the report from Planning Commission, there's more latitude to make significant changes to the pending text change than there would be if this were being scheduled for public hearing.
Let me ask Mr. Paul, where is the project in process, and will a delay hurt the project moving forward?
So there have been 2 rounds of review. They're in for a 3rd of administrative site review. They've wanted to go ahead and start construction drawings so that they can move it forward quickly. They're at a point where they're about to just pull the plug and just not do the mezzanine space, because it would unduly delay the drawings and complete the project on their schedule. That's what the feedback, and that's why I'm really here today. Otherwise, we would let this get settled at some point, but it's definitely impacting this project, and every week matters. I can't tell you, if 2 weeks kills it or a month, but I know that it's of concern for their schedule.
Madam Mayor, I understand the concern there, but my concern here is the size of the mezzanine scale of what I'm hearing. It's almost like adding another story. That's what I'm kind of hearing from staff, and I don't think staff has had enough time to really vet this. I think this is I know we said we're moving these two special items because in the past when people had to sign up, staff had time to provide us information to make an informed decision. So, I mean, I feel better this being a separate item and not adding it, just from the simple fact that we make sure that, you know, we have no unintended consequences. Because I understand this one project, but it's a text change that impacts the entire city. And that's where my pause is.
I agree with Mr. Branch.
So, I'd like some sense from all of you. Okay, so what I would say to your client is please be patient. And the text change that we want to move forward, looking at everybody that they're not comfortable moving this forward with TC 120. But, you know, I have a real concern going forward. If we have definitions that are in conflict with the building code, that's problematic. We also want great design. That's problematic. So I guess based on the feedback I've just gotten, we would authorize staff to move forward with a separate text change. Everybody's nodding at me. Is that yes or no?
I think it's important that we do things the right way, but I don't like when our process sort of gets in our own way. So if we have codes that are not in agreement, like that's frustrating. But hearing staff say that they would prefer for it to be a separate text change, I mean, I defer to the staff's judgment on that. I remind everyone, though, that we don't make the decision at the table. It goes Planning Commission for public hearing, comes back to the table for public hearings. We're not doing anything today that's drastic. It would just be how to let it proceed. But hearing staff say they'd prefer for it to be a separate text change, then I'm going to defer to that.
Okay. So what we will do then, Mr. Bowers, if we could, I mean, I think that there's a sense of urgency here.
Right.
Do we need a motion? To move forward?
To authorize a text change, you
Okay.
do.
All right, so do I have a motion to authorize a text change on this subject?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. You have your marching orders.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lynn Hebe?
Hello, I'm Lynn Hebel. And thank you very much for your time today, everyone. I am here on behalf of the concern about the CAC. I received an email this morning that echoes concerns of many of my neighbors. I've been on Quail Hollow Drive since 1997 in the same house. Many of the residents there have been residents for more than 50 years. And this email, I came here to read it to you, but I'm not going to, because I've heard suggestions from this room that I hope you're considering, because we all know that power and privilege puts us in dangerous positions. Mm-hmm. And there are some scenarios that you're all familiar with. We all read the news. I would like to suggest that we could reconsider enabling the CAC again. Is that a possibility? Can we have a vote of can I see hands in the room that would like to see the CAC reinstated? Does that change your minds? I'm sorry? Well, disappointed and saddened is the concern of a lot of neighbors in Midtown. And frankly, they shouldn't be muted. That's your responsibility and mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. They won't be muted. In fact, the voices will be enhanced. So as you heard today, we are starting a new process, and we look forward to working with all of you on that. Thank you.
And Lynn, if you want to forward the email to me or to us, I'm happy to read it also. I enjoy reading and responding to emails. I mean that sincerely.
Yes, you could also leave it with the city clerk, and they can forward that to us. Okay? All right. Now we are on to matters scheduled public hearing. For those of you who are here for the Safe, Healthy, and Vibrant Neighborhood portion, we are finishing up the current city council meeting, and we'll start with that as soon as we're done. So thank you for your patience, everyone. Matters scheduled for public hearing. First is the 90-day repair or demolish. I'm going to open up the hearing for location 1705 Oakwood Avenue. Ralph Matthews, is anyone here for that for this hearing? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Isaac Jerome Fleming, and I'm one of the co-owners of 1705 Oakwood Avenue. Ralph Matthews is our patriarch. My father-in-law, he couldn't be here. My wife, she's out sick, and I didn't want her
We have
to
3 minutes on this.
get anyone sick here. Sure you can appreciate that, as well as my brother-in-law, Alex Matthews. Again, thank you for allowing me to present today. I want to also thank Mr. Bryce Abernathy. I've not met him, but I've talked to him several times on the phone, and Mr. William Potter and Chris Board. They also affiliate the city of Raleigh. This property has been in our family for a number of years, and thanks to Mr. Potter and Mr. Board, we've come to a decision as of January 24th to put the property on the market for sale. I'm pleased to announce that on Friday, January the 15th, or I'm sorry, Saturday, February the 15th, we received a purchase and contract offer, and the property is under contract to be sold. It's our understanding that the new buyer plans to either renovate or destroy or demolish the property. So I'll be quick and just say to you that our ask is, I know that we as a family understand what you guys are tasked with doing today. It's just our ask that you possibly remove and or delay the ordinance to demolish the property. With that said, are there any questions at all?
No, I'd like to hear from staff on this. Housing staff? Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. My name is Bryce Abernathy. I'm with the Housing and Neighborhoods Code Enforcement Division. I'm bringing 1705 Oakwood Avenue here to you today. We did start a minimum housing case on this property back in July of 2017. It had to be rewritten once due to poor delivery through the Postal Service. We initiated the case due to some extensive, as you can see, roofing roofing issues. A lot of the additional items that were damaged in it were related to that. There were some minor electrical issues inside also. We've given them an extension back in January 2019 to either figure out how to get it repaired or sell the property. I did talk to Mr. Fleming yesterday in regards to it, and he did mention that the property had been sold. Historically speaking, council has always gone ahead with adoption of this, and that's what we're asking you to do today. Essentially, it's a 90-day repair demolish. It's given whoever the owner may be 90 days to repair or demolish that property. If it comes down to the end of that 90 days and they need more time, or they've started working on it, or are in the process of pulling demo permits, we can certainly work with them on that. But
Okay, then what I would suggest we do is authorize staff to move forward with this, but also instruct you to work with potential new buyer, especially around that 90-day time frame.
Absolutely.
If we don't have to tear down a house, we don't want to.
Right, Madam Mayor, if I could, can we just make it 180 days since they have a new buyer? Because I know sometimes things get caught up at the bank.
I think that one thing I don't want to see happen is if sale doesn't go through and this continues to sit here, let's leave it to staff's judgment, and I'll compromise with you. How about 120?
120 works.
Okay.
I think that we should be lenient and allow folks to have the opportunity to sell a property that they just listed.
And
It's
it's sold.
sold.
Well, I know, but if the point, if your concern is that the sale doesn't go through and that's why you want to keep it at 90 so that it can be demolished,
I
then
just said 120.
and I'm saying let's give them the opportunity to continue to sell it in case it falls through. So 180 would give them the opportunity.
I've dealt with this kind of situation before, and it can be really tricky.
Well, good luck.
No. What we just said with staff is work with them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And if you need an extension, you come back to us.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that?
Well,
Okay.
I would certainly support Mr. Martin's recommendation of 180, but that's just me.
Okay. I made a motion. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Staff, and Mr. Matthew, I do ask that y'all, Fleming, come back to us around 100 days to give us an idea of progress.
If you haven't sold the property, come back to us.
Okay.
And then the new property owner, if they need more time, staff, you come back to us. Okay? Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for their time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Okay, now we have text change for zoning conditions, TC Z 519, 3708 Rock Quarry Road. Who is here for that case? May I ask if anybody was here to speak against this case? Is there anyone here to speak in favor of this case, the applicant? Is there an
Update, the applicant was not able to attend the meeting today and has asked for it to be deferred to your next meeting.
Sure. Okay.
Are you sure?
Well, I mean, I guess if you're ready to render a favorable decision, they would potentially be fine with that as well.
Well, there's nobody here against it. I'm going to open the hearing and ask if anybody would like to speak on this matter. Okay, I'm going to close the hearing.
I've
this
read.
is
This is in my district. I've read the background. The CAC approved this. The Planning Commission approved this. And I've heard comments from the community. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated January 14th, 2020, containing the agenda materials, and to approve the text change to the conditional use zoning.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, the next item is Z4319. I'm going to ask the same question. Is there anybody here to speak against this case? I'll ask again, anyone here to speak against this case? Z4319 Leesville Road. Okay, we're going to do what we did last time, if you're okay with this, Ms. Maddox.
There's one thing we've got to do with this case, Isabel. We need to switch an applicant out before, so you
What's that
vote.
mean?
Good afternoon. My name is Isabel Maddox, P.O. Box 946, Raleigh 27602. I'm here today on behalf of the Lois Berry Trust and my client, Tri-Point Homes. We've had this case in process. We've gone through the normal steps, but I must note, sadly, that the owner of this property, located at 10805 Leesville Road, Lois Spikes Berry, died last week at age 95. She was surrounded by her family. And her sons are here today. Her property at her death vested in her living trust. And the trustee, Tom Berry, her oldest son, has signed a revised application reflecting that the property is now owned by the trust, and he agrees with the terms and conditions of the zoning application, including the conditions. And I have to offer up to council a copy of Ms. Berry's will, which provides that upon her death it goes into her trust. I then also have a certification of trust, which confirms the authority of the trustee to bind the property. And then I have a revised rezoning application, which has been revised only to change the signature block to reflect the Lois Spikes Berry Living Trust and signed by John Thomas Berry Jr., trustee. So I'll hand these up to
The clerk, please.
And with that, I can go through the case if you like.
Well,
I just wanted to make sure that we had the right application in front of you. And so now we do. We just needed to change out the signature and get authority to go forward with the new owners.
okay. There's no opposition, so I think we've opened the hearing. I can close the hearing and we can take a vote, if that's okay
fine.
with you all.
That's
all right, so all that has transpired, Robin, where we have changed and authorized this.
Correct.
Okay, all right. So having said that, closing the hearing, would someone, Councilor Knight, this is your
In my district.
See if I can get this correct. I move to adopt the proposed consistency statement dated February 18th, 2020, contained in the agenda materials, and to approve the zoning amendment.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, so it's 7-1. I would like to say I'm very sorry for your loss of your mom.
Madam Mayor, if I can ask staff with some of the changes, and right now with our CACs, can we add the district to the file? Maybe where it says CAC, put the district in there or something in addition, because that would be helpful for the council and I think
Yes.
the community as well.
Very good suggestion. Yes, that will make it easier for us to determine who, because sometimes it's not really clear. So thank you on that. Okay, next we have the report and recommendation of the Economic Development and Innovation Committee. You have a meeting to announce?
Yes. We are not going to meet in February. Our next meeting, our first meeting of this session, is going to be Tuesday, March 24th at 1:30 p.m. in the council chambers. This will give us an opportunity to learn more about our city economic development programs and hear from our local partners. City Council would like to strengthen our economic development partnerships, and having these meetings will help gain a better understanding and foster support. We are moving our April meeting due to a scheduling conflict. We will meet on Thursday, April 23rd from 1 to 2:30 p.m. in the council chambers. Our regional partners, including the state, county, and chamber, will share information about working together with the city to promote business recruitment and retention, workforce development, and equity and inclusion.
Okay, thank you.
Gail's looking at me weird, but you have a copy of that already, right? You the dates and everything? Okay, good. I spoke too quickly, I'm sorry.
No, it's setting a meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, yes, we've set this meeting. Jim Green had asked for the opportunity to bring this forward.
Oh, I see.
And, okay?
Got it. No.
No.
I didn't know if there's not a referral in there. Is that correct? So this is a briefing?
Yes, it's a
meeting, I
briefing.
guess?
Do I need to ask for permission to meet with the partner? No?
No, I just, but this isn't an item referral from the council, it's a briefing on the
I'm
partnership.
trying to have a committee meeting.
Yes, I can.
The first one.
Yes, I got you. Okay, that sounds great. All right, good.
He was just momentarily confused.
That's right.
That's all.
I'm sorry. I got you.
It's been kind of a long day. Okay, GNR.
GNR met on Monday, February 10th to discuss possible changes to Chapter 9 of the UDO, which addresses natural resource protection. We received a presentation from the city attorney, and we had staff members present from Public Utilities, Stormwater, and Planning and Development, who helped us explore this issue further. The committee was interested to learn more about the impact of the current regulations, as well as anticipated impact should the council choose to change those regulations. So we have asked for some more information on this issue. We plan to review that information before providing a recommendation back to the city council. We will meet as scheduled next Tuesday, February 25th at 4 p.m. here in the council chambers. We plan to discuss the recommendations that the Environmental Advisory Board made to the City Council related to waste reduction and recycling, and we'll start to discuss item 1903, Guidelines for Commercial Hillside Development Study. I will send that to you. Done.
Okay. Let's see, next is Safe, Vibrant, and Healthy Community Committee. As you can see, we made a recommendation to authorize staff to draft a text change, which is attached, and hopefully you have all read that. But basically, the text change would bring forward to the Planning Commission recommendation to simplify the method for measuring maximum building heights for residential structures. And it also recommends that staff, recommends in the text change that Planning Commission consider simplifying the method for determining front yard setbacks for residential zones. As you recall, both of these issues were brought before council. We reviewed that at our last meeting. So I'm going to make a motion to approve this. Do I have a second? Second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. And then we have the Transportation Transit Committee.
We will meet February 27th at 3 p.m. here in the chamber.
Okay, thank you. Next is a report from the mayor and the city council. Councilor Cox, we start with you this time.
Yes, thank you. A lot of good things have been happening in Raleigh lately. We are honored to hear the announcement that the NHL Stadium Series will be hosted next year here in Raleigh. And we've also recently announced the establishment of a new compassion fund to help those in Raleigh who are less fortunate than ourselves. For the Stadium Series, it's been requested that we contribute to that to a sum of $200,000. And I like to think that whatever we do as a city, that we do it in an equitable fashion. And if we are to invest in the Stadium Series, I'd like us to also explore the possibility of partnering with the NHL and the Hurricanes to see what we can do to help raise money for the Compassion Fund that we have seeded or plan to seed with $25,000. And the money would be earmarked to help pay the deposits for people who are currently living in hotels. And this is particularly important for me and my district, District B, as well as District C, because we have several thousand school-aged children living in hotels right now in this city. And if we can partner with an organization such as the NHL and the Hurricanes to help raise additional money to put into that fund, we would go a long ways towards addressing a serious problem in this city. So I'd like to ask the city manager and staff if they could have a discussion with the Hurricanes and the NHL to see if that might be a possibility.
And I agree.
So I actually have had conversations with the Carolina Hurricanes. They are looking at ways they could help through their foundation. That's the avenue that they use to provide funding back to the community, and they also focus on kids in need. So this aligns with their mission, and those discussions have started, and we will continue to have those based on, part of it is their grant process, and when that process, it's not aligning with the request, so they're going back and looking at how they can work with us, especially in time for that game.
That's great, and certainly if staff can follow up and bring back a report at some point, that would be great.
Okay.
The one other item that I had, I'm sorry, is that we heard from Linda Smith in the Brentwood neighborhood. Bald eagles have been sighted in the Brentwood neighborhood. I brought this up previously during the last council session, and but even more recently, more eagles have been sighted in the same general location as the Brentwood Sewer Project. And I just want to be sure that city staff is following all of the federal regulations regarding the protections of these animals, and to be sure that our sewer project, as it moves forward, does not harm or these birds or and ensures that we are following the proper federal procedures.
Okay, Councilor Buffkin.
I have no report. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Knight.
Just a couple of items. I want to say that I don't think we've met publicly or had opportunity to talk about the retreat we had, the 2-day retreat. I thought it was very successful, and thanks very much to the mayor and to the staff for putting that on. My first one, of course, but I've heard from those that have been in them before that this was one of the better ones, according to the mayor. She's been in plenty of them. And we got to work on our new 5-year strategic plan for the city, so we look forward to working through that with the citizens and residents of Raleigh. Also, the newbies here got to take a facilities tour, and we'll continue to do that, which was a very exciting, believe it or not, to see the water treatment plant, but also to visit the fire station and talk to the fire department about their work too, and as well as the Parks Department. So thanks for carrying that on with the new folks, and look forward to working with those different departments of the city. Thanks.
Councilor Stewart.
No report.
Martin?
Just two things. The first is I wanted to bring to everyone's attention that over the last 2 weeks, there have been close to 40 detainees across the I-40 corridor by recent ICE activity. So yesterday I worked with a couple nonprofits to do a media outreach campaign, but the majority of those detentions were actually in Raleigh. Which is something that we haven't seen before. And a lot of those were targeted mainly in north, kind of in my district, and then in David Cox's district. And so just as we're all moving forward, just being aware that that's impacting a lot of folks in our area that aren't just aren't new here, but anyone that is an immigrant is facing that fear of what that means. And the second thing is something that has been brought up to me and to some of you, is the idea and the need to have the voice of the community at the table as we start the affordable housing bond process and how that takes shape at the committee level. And I think that what staff has done to get us to this point with a committee list that they've produced is great, and is not a list that I could have produced myself. And then I think that our job as we review that list is to see where there are gaps that we can help fill. And my recommendation would be that given the short amount of time that we have between now and May, when we have to actually approve something and start that conversation, is we have to work really hard to make sure that the community is bought in. So my recommendation to just start the conversation and put on the table is to make sure that people that are actually impacted by lack of affordable housing and the people living through the affordability crisis are at the table and part of the conversation. And so I would recommend that we add additional positions to that committee to help be a part of that conversation and to help guide folks at the policy level.
And I support that recommendation.
Councilor Martin, that could delay the process. Let me offer a suggestion, if you would. I was contacted by somebody who I actually spoke with today who's interested in participating. Could we ask the committee to reach out to people who have contacted us and ask them to have a meeting with people who are impacted? That will ensure that the work of the committee can move forward. And they're part of the process.
I mean, I think that that's something that needs to happen naturally, but I think that there has to be, there's a difference of talking with and then also having a voice at the table. And so I think that's the nuance, is trying to figure out how we do both. And I
have a suggestion.
Sure.
As you were saying this. So Triangle Family Services, CASA, and I think there are other organizations that actually provide supportive services and coordinated services to people who are in need of housing. They work directly with them. Could we ask some of them to bring forward folks that they're servicing?
Yes.
So they could tell their stories, so the committee has a really good understanding about some of the hardships and also the needs that are out there. Would that work?
That sounds like a step in the right direction, and I think that I know that a lot of those organizations have folks serve on their boards as well when I've talked with them, and so I think that if we lean on them to help us in this conversation, then I think that it takes the work off of us to try and figure out who this is.
Okay, so
I would also like to suggest the Congregations for Social Justice be involved in this process as well.
So City Manager, could you ask staff to, well, basically include, as Mr. Cox suggested, congregations for social justice, but also people who are representing those in need of housing, to bring some of those folks forward to talk to the committee about their hardships and whatnot. So I think what we want is their story told, so everybody on the committee understands the needs and also some of the hardships. So, and how do we best address those?
And just from the standpoint of logistics and management, I guess you're suggesting around 3 or 4 is a number?
Well,
from
there are a number of agencies that are included on the Affordable Housing Committee, so I would leave it up to them, but a representative sample of folks that they could bring to a committee meeting to talk about that.
Sure, we will be happy to reach out. I just wanted to get some sense of scope to help advise the staff who are here listening, obviously.
So to clarify, are these individuals going to be presenting to the committee, or will they be a part of the committee?
Presenting to the committee. They're represented by the like Triangle Family Services represents hundreds of people who are in this situation. CASA as well, with veterans and disabled services. I think DHIC is also on that committee. So asking them to bring people forward, that way there's some, let me put it this way, there's some confidentiality rules there too with coordinated care and supportive housing. But so they know who the people are that they're serving. Have them make the ask for them to come forward and participate with them in terms of information, but they're not on the committee. The committee is formed.
If I may, if we could do that, but also extend an invitation to the Congregations for Social Justice so that they also have a seat on the committee, I think that would probably be a good balance.
That was the first part of my request.
Okay.
Okay. Are we good? Does that address your concern?
To be honest, not fully. But I think, I mean, I think that I'm hearing no one else is stepping up. So I'm going it alone. I mean, Mr. Cox is, so thank you. So my concern is it's an issue of equity, and having people come and say something is different than having a consistent voice at the table. And so coming and telling your story versus continually being there and being in conversation and being responsive to policy decisions is just, it's a different thing. And so I think that what the community is asking for is a seat at the table. And that's just a very different, and the same seat at the table that they have when they serve on the board at CASA or DHIC or Triangle Family Services. And so that was the initial request.
And I would support that request. I think if we're serious about equity, then we need to make sure that those voices are at the table and not just represented by other individuals at the table. And I really appreciate Congregations for Social Justice, but I think it's another organization that represents rather than bringing that voice.
No, I was trying to find a compromise, but if we have the votes to move this forward, I will support that.
Well, so we have a 20 person or organization committee right now, right? And we authorize staff to select it in an effort to streamline the process. So I think we have to be careful of not delegating authority and then second guessing the authority and slowing down the process, but also being responsive to where we think there are pieces missing. So if we have a 20-person committee now, do we want to add like 2 or 4 seats and then come up with a quick process for identifying the voices that are missing, getting them included? Because I don't want to slow it down. I don't want to second guess staff, but I want to make sure that we have the right people at the table.
I think the easiest way to solve that, which is a great point, Councilor Melton, is for the groups that offer, to the mayor's point, to the groups that offer, the groups that are already on there that offer the kind of coordinated care and the existing services, that each one would get, and they would get to nominate, understanding the confidentiality issues, they would then get to nominate someone that is part of their existing program going through a housing program that has the capability to join them as a dual appointee on the committee with them. So it would be, they'd kind of get a second appointee, but while it seems like we're doubling up their representation, really it's a completely different voice, because that person, we're asking for not their representation of the organization, but what is it like as someone who is going through the
Would you be okay with a former client?
Sure, absolutely. In some ways that might be more fair than someone that's actively going through the program.
So what we're saying is the groups like CASA, it's like CASA now plus one. And CASA can bring forward someone who they have engaged with in the process to have a voice at the table to explain that experience as we're looking at putting together a system.
And one thing I will say, we are going to hold 2 community meetings as part of this, but I also hope that the outreach is more than just we're having a meeting.
Yeah, it's more than what we do. But
So I see Marshall here. Marshall, do you understand what we're requesting? That CASA and Triangle Family Services perhaps bring a former client to the table. Okay, but not hold things up. Thank you. Okay, all right, thank you, good compromise.
3 quick items. The first one is I received an email today concerning Ottawa Village, traffic calming, and the need for some stop signs. I will forward that on to staff, but I just want to make sure that it does get some attention, because they've been on the list for streetscape and traffic calming, and we know how those lists grow or shrink and things of that nature. But I want to definitely make sure we pay attention to that. Secondly, I'm passing out, it's a resolution that impacts our boards and commissions. And I'm not asking for a vote today. I'm just asking everyone to look at it. Basically, in summary, what this resolution states is we have vendors that when residents go to the convention center or use any of our public transportation, they see that staff as city employees. And we have boards and commissions that deal with issues and challenges for those boards for that particular area. So this resolution basically does not allow anyone, particularly with someone that may work within our convention center area or within our transit system, to sit on a board that oversees there. So they can sit on another board, but not on a board that oversees what they do. Because a lot of times the policies and things impact them directly, and we have protocol for that to be addressed. So I want to thank the city attorney's office for helping with this, but I wanted you all to look at it and read it, see if you have any questions, and then we'll bring it back. Lastly is I'll get one to you, Madam Clerk.
No, are you going to bring it back, or do you want us to put it on the agenda next
You can put
time?
it on the agenda. That works perfectly. It can be a special item if that's okay with the mayor.
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, I've been doing district meetings for the last 26 months. And from time to time, residents within the district have questions about projects and things, and they've reached out to city staff. With our recent motion that was made by the body, that we all know who voted how for it. City staff currently is not allowed to attend my District C meeting that I have. And my ask and my request is for such a meeting as that. Our old process was, if we have a District C meeting or a district meeting, we would come to the council and say, hey, we have an issue. We would like staff to come and present at this meeting on this day. We make sure everyone knows that what this does is make sure that we're not overtaxing our staff, because these meetings are on early Saturday mornings. So my question is, can we reinstate that request as long as we follow basically the process we had prior to any recent changes that impacted staff participation, that if you have a district meeting, as long as, the other council members are aware, that staff can still come and participate.
So what I would suggest is that and you all tell me what you think, that you bring up this issue with council and make the request beforehand. And then what I would also suggest is that it not be related to planning or zoning issue, like a zoning issue. So in other words, I would like to ensure that we follow the zoning process and text change for that. But if you have somebody who wants to, a resident who wants to hear, say, about a greenway or a new parks project or an update on Chavis, then that's something we would honor for all neighborhood groups. But as long as you ask beforehand, I don't have any problem with that.
I think
Like
I'm a
some
little
feedback.
confused because we were told at orientation that we each can hold a certain number of community meetings every year with staff support, and that as long as we clear it with the council, that's no problem. I don't understand how, did that change?
That really wasn't a policy.
It was just an
That
understanding?
Yeah.
So we're just trying to make that like an actual policy?
Well, I'm just trying to get clarity. So when I use a great example, the community had reached, and the city staff had communicated about the Old East Area Plan, and they had already signed up for someone to come and present at the District C meeting. But because of the vote in motion that was took place at the last meeting, there wasn't any clarity, from my understanding, to staff on what meetings they can and cannot attend. So that's why I'm bringing this to the table right now.
Right, and I have a situation like in the Brentwood area where they've been affected by murders, actually, near the neighborhood, where they would like to be able to meet with the police department and be able to have discussions about those situations and what can be done about it. And
Does Brentwood have a neighborhood association?
well, they have a neighborhood association. They've relied very heavily on the CACs.
But they have a neighborhood association.
They have a neighborhood association, and I intend to be holding district meetings myself in Brentwood. And so I would like, from time to time, as needed, be able to request the presence of the police department that can come in and talk to people about their concerns.
Mm-hmm.
They're also undergoing, other issues in the area with traffic calming and road widening projects and things like that they would also like to request to be able to meet with staff, particularly as traffic calming goes into place, and in the past we've been able to invite transportation's been able to come out to the CAC meetings and be able to meet with people there. So I intend to hold these district meetings, and I'll hold them without staff resources if I need to, but I would prefer to be able to request staff resources.
Can I suggest, given the current situation that I've provided for everyone so graciously, that the new tradition perhaps could be that if we're holding district type meetings without staff resources, that we don't need to come before council to ask for approval, because I don't think that's, I want to be able to meet with folks and not need to come before the council. But yet, if we do want, the police presence and or parks, and we're doing kind of a larger thing, then we continue to honor the tradition that existed previously with other councils.
And that's
Does
the
that
way,
work?
Yeah, that would be the same as we had before, and that's my intent of my request.
Okay, so do we need a motion for this? Do you want a policy or policy guidance in form of a motion, or?
I would actually suggest not making this a motion at this point, because I think there's some intricacies to that would need I'd like to get some clarity. I'm totally fine with, staff is totally fine supporting council meetings and council district meetings. I don't think there's any question that that's part of our role, and we want to try to do that. I think where we are is we need some clarity and understanding and everyone's on the same page, and so that we're treating everybody fairly and equally. That's really all we're trying to achieve here.
So
what I would suggest maybe is, why don't we bring back a draft set of guidelines that the council could review that talks about the town hall meetings versus the council district meetings. And
they're still in my orientation notebook. You can
right.
You can do it.
We can use those. Yeah, we can use those. And to Mr. Branch's point, that is correct. In the past, there was an informality there that if the council member had the district meeting and didn't need staff, that wasn't something that.
That's
other
not
than
a
reserves,
trigger.
That's not an issue. The issue is staff presenting at council regular district meetings, and the way that was handled is usually you guys would just simply announce the meeting at the table and what the subject was. So I think that's part of what got us, in some issues on the last one that Mr. Branch is referring to. And so perhaps a one-page bulleted list of guidelines would help us have clarity on what that direction is, and then we can just apply them. And I don't think it needs to be terribly different than what we were doing before.
No,
That would be my
just so
that's
we
my
all
suggestion.
understand what the rules are. And, again, and then we follow the process that we outlined for the text change for any zoning-related issues.
Right, and I think it's fair that there's a whole different discussion related to, when we say planning and zoning, it really means rezoning and text changes.
Right.
It could be a presentation of a small area plan, that although that word is planning, that's not the
Exactly.
same as the formal approval process. I'm just trying to help. So why don't we bring back a draft set of guidelines to the next council meeting, and then that'll give you a draft to react to, and then we can get on the same page.
Okay.
How about that?
All right.
That's
thank
all I
you.
have.
All right, Council Melton.
I'll be very quick. I brought this up at the last meeting when we were talking about the Compassion Fund. We talked about it at our retreat a little bit as well. I have met with some shelter managers. There are a lot of folks who are in possession or have been granted housing choice vouchers, and they don't have anywhere to use them. So I understand that the city cannot legally require landlords to accept vouchers, but generally I would like to ask that staff provide information about steps that we can take to require acceptance of vouchers and other housing subsidies for housing that has received city financial assistance. So if the city is a part of the transaction, then I do think we have some authority or influence in facilitating those landlords accepting housing vouchers or other housing subsidies. If there are city programs that provide financial assistance for housing development that do not require acceptance of these housing choice vouchers, I would ask that city staff and city attorney's office provide us with options of what we can do to encourage or require that vouchers be accepted for similar projects in the future.
Okay.
I don't know if I have to ask, do we need to vote on that?
It's.
I think I think staff hears the request. I think we need some information because I think there may be some unintended impacts in that request that we need to make sure we vet.
Let's just bring
because
vote
we have to make sure, because we have to, what I'm thinking here sitting here is we have to make sure we're not saying because we gave you money you have to do this. And
I think it's
things
more
of that
if
nature.
we own the property and then whatever. Yeah.
I've been
Then
talking
we
to
have more
the
of a
city
say.
attorney's office about it a bit, and I think we just want to bring forward options and we can vet through them.
Okay. Thank
Good.
you. Yes. Okay. I'll end on a light note. Let's see. I attended the Community Success Forum with the Chamber of Commerce this morning. Tom Berry did an excellent presentation on housing affordability. And I would ask if you would, City Manager, if you can get the Chamber to share that with us, with you, and then distribute to the full council. I would really like to, for all of you to have the opportunity to review it. But the other thing I would also suggest is that, you know, have talked about the Urban Design the Urban Design Center, reinitiating the community discussions. He would be an excellent choice for that. It was a really good presentation. The second thing I want to, I guess I'm on a CATS thing today, but I want to compliment Raleigh Transit and Raleigh Arts for working together to do a tribute to Tucker, our Oak City kitty who passed away. And they came up with something very innovative. And I think there's 5 different areas around this downtown now where you can see Tucker in all his glory and meanness, but he's still adorable. So anyhow.
Can we get a map of all the Tucker locations?
Yeah.
You think I'm joking. I'm serious about
Yeah.
this.
If you could
I
update
need-
us in the
I need to
manager's
know.
report.
Yeah.
It's great selfie stuff.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Thanks, Ruffin.
Yeah, man.
We were happy to try to serve, you know.
You've never gotten a weirder request, have you?
Don't answer.
I have an answer to that, but we'll save that for after the cameras turn off.
Okay. So next we have appointment city clerk.
Appearance Commission, 1 vacancy, no nominees. Civil Service Commission, you have 1 vacancy. Patricia Holland received 7 votes. So would be appointed, but is there a delayed, is there a date that should take place because we have a big case going on now?
I thought there was a date suggested that she start. Is it in the backup?
I don't know, I didn't get it.
I know there was a date in the future.
We just said we'll let you all work that out and notify her on when she starts.
I don't have
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alrighty, but she is appointed at a time to be determined.
Excellent.
Historic Cemeteries Advisory Board, 2 vacancies, no nominees. Raleigh Transit Authority, 1 vacancy for an alternate member. Sarah Prado received 7 votes, so would be appointed. Human Relations Commission, 1 vacancy. Tori Dixon received 7 votes, so would be appointed. Substance Abuse Advisory Commission, 1 vacancy, no nominees. On the nominations, Human Relations Commission, you have 1 vacancy. The term of Tati Padilla is expiring. She is eligible for reappointment and would like to be considered.
I'll move for reappointment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Planning Commission, you have 1 vacancy. The term of Bob Geary is expiring. He is eligible for reappointment as far as length of service and would like to be considered. And we had a nomination from Councilmember Stewart for Nicole Bennett.
Well, I would like to move to reappoint Mr. Geary. I would like to move that we reappoint Mr. Geary.
Do we have a second? Motion fails. We'll consider this at our next meeting. Go on.
Did you want to nominate?
Yes, if
He's nominated.
Nominate.
I'm nominating.
Okay.
Okay.
Transit Authority, you have 1 vacancy. The term of Sharita McCullins is expiring, and she is not eligible to, as she has served 6 years. So 1 vacancy for consideration.
Can I make one request to council members as we're looking to fill this spot? The authority is missing someone from with a disability, ADA required disability. So if we could find someone that meets that requirement, I think it would help the board.
The late Les Seitz did a
Les
wonderful
Seitz.
job
Yep,
with that, so that's a really good suggestion.
The next item is Stormwater Management Advisory Committee. The term of Evan Kane is expiring. He is eligible and would like to be considered for reappointment.
I'll move to reappoint.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. Next, we have a report and recommendation of the city attorney.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just have one item. At the February 4th meeting, as a part of several motions, the council asked staff to move forward with a UDO text amendment that would add a second neighborhood meeting to the rezoning and text change to conditional use zoning conditions to the process. We've worked with planning, and we have drafted such a text amendment. I have provided a copy to all of you. Just briefly, the request was that it was for more, that the second meeting would apply to more larger and more impactful cases. As drafted, the text amendment would apply to properties of 5 acres or more. They would have to meet just one of these criteria, and it would be larger than 5 acres or more. Increasing the building height to 5 stories or more than 5 stories. In other words, if you're 3 stories and you go to 5, it would be triggered. If you're 5 and you go to 10, it would be triggered. Residential density would be increased by 10 dwelling units per acre or more. It's a change from a residential or conservation management district to mixed use or a special zoning district, a more intense district, and any kind of planned development. The way that it's currently drafted, it would be held after the application is deemed complete. That's sort of a sliding scale depending upon what all is required, but it can't go to the Planning Commission until it's complete. And before Planning Commission review. So it's after it's been filed and before it goes to Planning Commission. There would be a notice radius of 1,000 feet, which is double what it is for other notices under the UDO. There would be a report required similar to the one that's now required before filing, but it also would provide the opportunity for people who attend the meeting to present written comments. This should be done 10 days before Planning Commission. That was a request of staff to be able to put it in the backup. That doesn't mean you can't come to Planning Commission and speak your mind, but to actually get in the agenda packet, they need a little bit of lead time. Now that is scheduled. We already have authority to move forward with the text amendment, and it's going to the Planning Commission on February 25th. What you can do, you have two options. You can wait for them to report back and call a public hearing, but as we did recently with another text amendment, if you want to expedite the process, you can go ahead and call a public hearing for your March 3rd meeting and encourage the Planning Commission to vote it out on the 25th, and then it would come back to you then. If for some reason they didn't vote it out, Gail and I would just figure out what to do with the publication. But I wanted to give you that option, let you know that this is underway, and if you wanted to go ahead and set the public hearing today, you can do it. But again, that's up to council.
Okay. Could I ask one suggestion in this? Could we also put something in there about staff would attend the second meeting for the purpose of being a resource? So in other words, you know, being able to respond to questions that arise. They have the technical knowledge and whatnot. So staff would attend that second meeting.
We can put it in there, but I would probably want to talk to the planning staff and ask if they think that should be actually in the ordinance or in the policies. And you can certainly write it in there.
Yeah. Either way is fine.
I would suggest, just for flexibility purposes, that you just have that as council expectations rather than writing it into the code.
Okay. I just wanted clarity on that.
Yes, absolutely, that can be. So, and I did want to emphasize, this is like any text amendment. If you like it like it is, you can check it off and move it through, but it is in its early stages. The Planning Commission may have recommendations. You may find other tweaks or other changes based on a public hearing, but this is just getting it in the queue. And again, we realize that you may want to do this sooner rather than later, and again, that's up to the council.
Councilor Melton.
Yeah, I think that we need to go ahead and set the public hearing to get this moving as quickly as possible, to help address some of the void that Councilmember Branch brought up at the last meeting. And I don't see any harm in setting the public hearing for March 3rd, asking the Planning Commission to conduct their review on the 25th. If for some reason we want to hold it at the table on the 3rd, we can do that, but at least we notice it and it gives us flexibility. So I move that we set the public hearing March 3rd and request Planning Commission to conduct their review on the 25th.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. Passes 7-1. Okay, now we go to the report and recommendation of the city clerk.
The first item is a proposed resolution relating to adjusting, rebating, and refunding penalties and exemptions for property tax, which is recommended for adoption.
So,
Move for
motion?
approval.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No one? Okay.
Excuse me. The second is surplus property sale, 219 Parkland Road. The council declared this surplus in October of 2019. Subject to the upset bid process, we've gone through a series of upset bids, and the time period has closed, so it is recommended that you adopt a resolution authorizing the sale of the property to Paul A. Furr Jr. for $25,000 plus advertising costs, and authorize the appropriate parties to sign necessary instruments of conveyance.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, there we go. All right, if there's no other business, I am,
Minutes.
oh, the minutes.
Oh, I'm
All
sorry.
right, come on.
Move for approval of the
Minutes.
minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we're done. All right.